That's their fundamental belief, is that death is optional. And so their belief is that they can create a copy of the mind and what they call a mind file. And you see, this is what Elon Musk talking about. I made a clone of myself.
Does man even deserve the knowledge to create when the consequence of his creations is so ravenous?
And so these companies are getting the power to play God without the accountability or responsibility to the people.
To where you have to empower yourself with the knowledge to say, okay, how about we create some of this preventative technology to where we get to change things and create more order from the chaos?
So I feel like some of these groups that are going to the other extreme with the naming and with the identity and receive my reality as real or I'm gonna force it on you, right? Are just copying what's been done to them.
A lot of times progress is the enemy of peace. Peace is solace with things the way that they are, right? We all free, we good, I like where we at, and then somebody comes, nope, I want to build something that's gonna change everything. I appreciate my pops for teaching me how to be a guy.
From a boy to a man and ultimately back into the natural state of being into a God.
As guys, we're supposed to always move with that higher self. And I have to be able to execute it. Having knowledge is not power, the execution of knowledge is power. Knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave. Because the only real knowledge you can get is knowledge of self.
The highest level. The highest level is ownership. The highest level is power. The highest level is sovereignty. The highest level is higher consciousness. The highest level is we own our own choices.
Excellence at a very high level. Not eye level. A high like that.
It's time for a high level conversation.
We're here for another high level conversation. High level conversation. Tap in with the God.
Peace, family. Welcome back to another high-level conversation. Technology and all its capabilities always destroys, builds, makes things obsolete, creates shifts on the planet Earth. When you get down to what technology is, it really is art, skills, and crafts in the way that it's fashioned together. If we're talking about the actual definition, there are all sort of types of technology. We are in a technology, and the way we use ourselves can be a technology. But what we've been speaking upon recently in human history is exterior technology. That's an extension of human capabilities. But the question is not even just what technology is why, and why is it during these times? Human beings go through multiple periods of time where we create these different shifts. And these shifts come about as men are either trying to create comfort, man is trying to rebuild a new world, because technology can be seen as a disruption. Because if a world is a wave, then technology is coming to create a disruptive wave and to change things. So technology, for a lot of people, they see it as change, right? They see it as a chaotic force even. And we're living in a period of time where people are trying to rectify with the new time, the new shift, the new changes. Whether that's people's occupation, whether that's businesses, whether it's the way that we go about living life in relationships, whether that's security, safety, reform, art, all different areas are affected anytime there's new technology on the planet Earth. But it just represents that man is entering a new dawn, a new period, right? He has energy that he wants to put in different directions, and the status quo is never going to ever be the same, especially as we continue to create new technology. Today, the person that I'm going to be having a conversation with is someone who thinks about it in a very thoughtful way, right? And one of the last high-level conversations that we had, we talked about clean technology. That if you have a man with a dirty mind and he has a great ability to innovate, he's not going to create something that is clean. He's going to create something with consequence. And that consequence has an effect, and the effects that those consequences have are the things that we create politics out of now. It's the things that people are activists against now. And one of the examples he gave was the creation of the iPhone or the cell phone and the consequential effects that it has on the earth, or the consequential effects that it may have on labor, right, and the politics of certain places, and all the things that happen from it, and thinking about, does man even deserve the knowledge to create when the consequence of his creations is so ravenous? So we're going to get into a high-level conversation that can go into many different facets. But one thing we're definitely going to talk about is the consequences of technology with X.
Peace, family. Excited to be here today.
Welcome to the show.
Excited to share some of this wisdom.
Wait, her name is X?
Before we get into it, I want to reverse it and go a little different than I usually start, because I usually start in the middle of a conversation, but I want to get a little bit of your story, right? I know that you've worked for, large institutions before, but I want to go to the military, right? And how that shaped you and how that informed your journey with technology leading up to it.
Yeah, I think it starts with the reason I joined the military, right? So I grew up one of 8 children, single mom who was recovering from crack addiction. And so, we grew up hella poor. And so in the neighborhood that I grew up in, when I looked around and I saw people around me who were able to do things like keep their lights on, keep their water on, have enough food for a meal for everybody in their house, they was doing criminal stuff. So for me, my algorithm for success, or like having food on the table every night, or having lights on, or having the ability to have a car that worked and didn't break down, was doing criminal things. So by the time I was 16, it was bad data in from the environment I was in. It was bad choices that I put out. So I ended up in juvie, ended up facing 3 felonies and 27 years in jail. I got blessed, God had my back, ended up getting a deferment program. And so part of me trying to figure out what was next and sort of expand my imagination about what was possible was running away from everything that was in that old life. And so when I went to the military, I had older brothers that had already joined. And so I was like, maybe that will be how I get out and get my life together. And I had started to clean my life up. I was going to community college, doing good, got into UC Berkeley, and then one day in my computer, I just got orders. It was like June 9th, 2012. They were like, June 30th, you're going to Afghanistan for 400 days. And I had no idea that I was going. It wasn't like my whole unit went. I was in the reserves, just me. And when I got out there, I ended up at the headquarters of all special operations for US, for ISAF, and for NATO forces. So the 2-star general I was working under ended up becoming the 4-star general over all special operations for the whole military. And so for me, that time in Afghanistan and what I saw did 2 things for me. One, it showed me the power of storytelling. When you work in those top secret cleared environments, you see how they get to decide what stories the public gets to hear. You see how they can hop on the phone with the New York Times and say, you can't run that story, it's national security, or you have to run it this way. Or they let stories run that they know are false.
Right.
Because then they got the proof, so at any point they could debunk it, but they want to go do something they don't want the media to pay attention to. So it really showed me the importance of storytelling, the stories we tell ourselves, and the way that stories we get fed are edited, and that the truth is always put in places that may be harder for us, especially as people of color, to reach. The second thing that I saw is the power of technology. I was touching artificial intelligence in 2012. Things that, commercially still aren't available.
Yeah.
They say, oh, we're trying to get there. Like, how you trying to get to where we already were in 2012? Like, y'all haven't touched that. And so it really showed me that technology is the magic of our generation. Like, if they can use these tools to decide who lives and who dies in a war, and to even cover up the mistakes they made when they hurt innocent people, right? Then why can't it be used to make sure that kids like me have food on the table every night? Why can't it be used to make sure that people who come from where I come from have their imagination expanded and aren't locked into their physical reality about what they can and can't be in life? And so coming back, I just made it a personal mission that, one, I was never going to work on no technologies like that for real again. Things that were being used to destroy communities who I have affinity with, or who look like me, or who represent my communities maybe in another country. And also just making sure that, like, everywhere that I went in life, I made sure to make sure that the information about the truth was accessible to as many people as possible, which is why I'm honored to be here today, because I know your platform does that.
Absolutely. Thank you for that intro. That was very interesting. Because especially when you think about the military and you think about military technology, and you think about a lot of innovations in America that happened because of the military. Our food technology, our microwave technology is mostly thankful because of the military, right? And they become, you know, everyday consumer retail products, right? But they were first used for military complex, right? Now, the military, of course, is, you know, famously known for having all of these different technologies that never reach, right, the public's eye. And of course, they use it for weaponry, right? By the time it gets to the public, it's, you know, a watered down version of something that they feel is safe enough to give to the people, or has already been embedded with whatever mechanisms of control that they want to have over it. You know, I remember when I was doing my study and my research about the mad world, and there was mutually assured destruction, right? Basically saying that if we have the same technology, then we can destroy each other. But then it got to a point where the military continued to, you know, innovate. And they was like, wait a minute, you got technology we don't have. This is not mutual anymore. And when I think about, let's say, artificial intelligence, you talked about, you know, touching artificial intelligence in 2012. Right, and at the time they was talking about lasers and, you know, WMDs and things of that nature. But in today's age, war looks different, right? And the weapons look different, right? So instead of a general, you know, employing, you know, missile or whatever it may be, he's going to be thinking about data, right? And he's going to be thinking about narratives, as you talked about. So what ways do you see are some of the most dangerous ways? First, let's start with, right? Because I always talk about the positive and beneficial use cases of technology. But what are some of the most dangerous ways you think technology can be utilized in military warfare?
Some of the ways it's already being used, right? So you have this company, Palantir. And Palantir was that thing in Lord of the Rings that was like the all-seeing eye, right? And they've been around for a minute now, but they just went public a couple of years ago, so people are just now paying attention to them. But in the military, when you're trying to figure out how to manipulate people's perception, it's called PSYOP. Psychological operations is the job. And they do what's called an information operation, which is where first you have to go map out the information environment. So let's say you're a soldier in Afghanistan and there's a particular province like Helmand province that is, you know, you're trying to figure out how to manipulate what the people think there, right? Because it's a contested area. They're not positive towards the U.S. They're not negative towards the Taliban. So you want to go in there and try to sway them one way or the other. First thing on the information operation you have to do is go map out the information environment, which entails everything from the physical reality to the social networks to who's an influential voice. So back in the day, that would be like, oh, what radio station are they listening to? What times are they listening to the most? Who's the most popular kid at the high school? So we could go pay him, or who's the imam in the community that has more political sway, even if they're not the main one. And so you would do this stuff manually. And then from there, you could plan out, your targeted mission operation. I forget what they called it. It's been years, but they called it your targeted information campaign. So then you'd figure out what you want them to say, and then you pick the channels you wanted to distribute it through. So I know that these high school students listen to the radio between 8 and 10 p.m. And so therefore, I'm going to go and I'm going to pay the radio station to run this message that's propaganda to them on the same day that earlier in the afternoon, the most popular high school kid going to say something about it. And then the next day, they're going to go and then a mom is going to preach a message about it.
Yeah.
And then we're going to see how their perception changes. So that's how they would map it out. And it was all manual. So there's lots of room for error, lots of room for humans that were on the other end of that campaign to be able to protect themselves. Like if you're not telling people who you cool with, you're not making your pattern so obvious, it's harder to be manipulated. But now it's all data driven. When you log into these social media companies and you like somebody's picture, you're creating what they call a graph. They call it a graph network in the technology. What that does is maps you to who's important to you, who matters to you, who's relevant to you, what you like, what you don't like. And then with platforms like Meta, if you link certain third-party apps that give their data to Meta, they can get a much bigger picture about you. So there's a very popular app for women to track their menstrual cycle. It's called Flow. And they give all their data to Facebook. So now, not only do I know that you like these people's pictures, this who you interact with more, but now I can see what you do during different phases of your cycle. When you on your cycle, right before your cycle, or you go look at your ex's page right before, and I know it's your ex because you done told me your relationship status and tagged them in it. So now all of that data is automated. What websites you go visit, and then you link up your Apple Watch and your health app, and they know when you sleep and know when you wake.
Yeah.
Now they can try that to all your other behaviors. And then you link that to your journal app where you telling them how you feel every day. And now they see it even more. And then you log in with your Google or with your Meta to all these other websites that are now automatically collecting all that data about you and creating a graph about you that understands you better than you do. So much so that Amazon has patented algorithms that can predict if you're gonna buy an item or not. And so now we go back to Palantir, the all-seeing eye, which was originally created as a private company to kind of help with that information targeting process. They wanted to make it easier so you don't have to go on the ground, undercover and go talk to people to figure stuff out. We can just figure it out with data. And they're huge. And I think they just won like another $180 million contract either yesterday or today. And so what they're doing constantly is they're basically scraping or making copies of the whole internet. They're making copies of all these documents. They're making it so that all these intelligence officers can upload their reports, and they're, they be spying on people. And this is what this meant. And they go have a diplomatic meeting and they writing their notes. Like all that stuff goes in there and creates an even more detailed graph about you. And the purpose of that is so that the military will say is to identify threats or to improve operational efficiency. What that means is, are you someone we need to be worried about? And if so, we already know everything about you to know how to change what you feel. That's dangerous to you. And all we're doing as individual individual humans in the world is participating in these digital platforms because they turn into real social currency. So if I don't have an Instagram, I'm gonna get looked at like I don't have an iPhone when I text somebody, right? Those things translate to real social benefits. So in order to participate in our society in a way where we have access to be able to come up or to be able to have additional streams of income, it requires that we participate in these platforms. So we really can't opt out. I mean, technically you can, but socially you really can't. And so now we're subject to being monitored and assessed in these ways. And the military's baby cousin, police forces, are using this same technology in ways that are absurd. There's a company, can't remember the name, but it's out of New York. The New York Police Department paid this company $8 million because they claim that they can predict if you're gonna make a crime in the future from your Facebook profile. And they've profiled all these people who live in New York. And they paid them $8 million.
Pre-crime.
It's like that movie. Minority Report. They're now trying to predict if you're gonna be a criminal.
Yeah.
What signals are you using from my Facebook to decide if I'm gonna be a criminal or not? I can't post song lyrics that I like. How was your algorithm trained? How was it tested to make sure it's not biased against certain things? And honestly, is that even something we should be using AI for? Artificial intelligence can't predict the future. It can only learn from the past and make more of the past. So if I, like myself, someone who started out in this game as a supervillain, if you will, I grew up in a neighborhood, I made bad choices, I ended up in juvenile hall. I hurt my own community in that process, stealing, you know what I mean? So back in the day, that's where I was. But that was not a good indicator of where I ended up. Now I'm a published researcher, high school and college dropout, still got published academic research. I created the research team that taught AI how to see Black and brown people. So if you were to just look at that data, you couldn't have predicted my future. So how can a tech company that doesn't even understand the cultural nuances of our slang, let alone our affinity for certain music, and our desire to repost it, how can they say that we've created an AI that can look at your past profile and predict if you're going to commit a crime in the future and then sell that technology?
Actually, wild.
And that says a lot about society and why we create technology. Because that same technology can use to prevent, right? And not just predict, but those markers of prediction, they're not, it's like the FBI don't watch you to try to prevent a crime, right? They're gonna let you fall into the trap to where they got enough on you to where they can lock you up, right? And the company is basically taking that same model and that same mind frame and saying, yeah, we'll go predict it. The cops ain't gonna try to intervene, right? They're not gonna figure out, all right, well, if you got the technology that can predict, what about the technology that can help prevent? Can you then create an algorithm where this person, you take their graph and their profile and you can then manipulate them to be a better citizen, right? No, because now you stop building prisons. Now you messing up with somebody else's business. Now that business go come after you like, wait a minute, how you go create a business that stops mine, right? I think that's really speaks upon, that's why we talked about clean technology, and it's like, man is not ready for the knowledge he has, right? And we've, my whole life, I love technology. I love science, right? I love progress. But I've been recently thinking about, a lot of times progress is the enemy of peace, right? Because peace is equanimity. Peace is solace with things the way that they are, right? Content with the way that they are, right? We all free, we good, I like where we at, and then somebody comes, nope, I want to build something that's going to change everything. But when you change everything and all these ripple effects happen, it disturbs the peace. So that's why I said at the beginning, technology is a harbor of chaos, in a lot of different ways. Sometimes we need that interruption, right? That interruption that says that, wait a minute, I don't like the way things are. I'm going to create something that change things for the better. But in that period, I have to create some chaos before we can get to order, right? And that's the whole balancement that it is trying to get to. But that is not where we at today as a society. You have some people that are on the light and the dark side spectrum, if you will. And then you have some people that's creating it unwittingly knowing that they're working for that side because they're not drawing out their attentions to the root to say, okay, I want this capital. I'm not really thinking about the ripple effects of how it be used. And that's how we get the turn. We have this blind justice. You know what I'm saying? Because we should have more things and more technology that is created for preventative measures, not predictive measures, right? If you have that power, harness it for a way to change society for the better, to where it's like, yeah, they build prisons based on, they say third grade reports. Now, of course, that's an obsolete way of looking at it, right? They can look at it before you was born and your parents coming together and say, oh, they had this certain amount of children, a bunch of them gonna end up in prison. So boom, based on these people coming together and they graphs and they profiles, yeah, make sure 2020 and 33, you feel me, we build at least 12 in this particular area because we already predicted where this path leads. So I believe it's on us on the opposite side. It's not the fear of technology, because those that we fear having it, it's not gonna stop building it, right? It's the other side to where you have to empower yourself with the knowledge to say, okay, how about we create some of this preventative technology to where we get to change things and create more order from the chaos? Information is everywhere. You can log into YouTube right now and type in almost any subject. But I'm gonna be honest with you, you won't even know if it's human generated or if it's just based on the algorithm that figured out that you wanted to find this subject. It queried your information, created an automated process so that they can get your eyeballs to try to sell you a product and get advertisement dollars. Humans need humans. We don't work and operate that well learning from machines, because it's the connection to the information, it's the connection to the process that allows us to grow our neurons. It's the connection that allows us to be able to tap into that tapestry of thought to where we need to learn and be in environments to where we feel aspirational and we are inspired and it's empathetic. So today it's not about just having access to the information. It's not just about being able to have democratized education everywhere. It's about connection. Are you actually connected to it? When you are in a community, it reinforces that environment of connection. And that's why being a part of high level is so important, so you are reinforcing an environment with that human connection. I see you, you see me, you feel felt, you want to learn. Information and data, statistics and numbers and automation is fine, especially if you want to create income and utilize the technology for such. But human connection has always been a real source of learning. Don't just go for the information. Go for the community and go for the connection. But I want to go back on too, as you was talking about social media, I want to go on what are some of the ways that people, in your estimated judgment, opinion, or observation, can protect themselves during this age?
Ooh, that's a difficult question. One with an answer that is not as easy as opting out, right? I think that's where we tend to go first is, well, if we don't like it, just don't participate. The reality is that that's not how our social environments have been constructed. So in lieu of opting out, the biggest thing that we can do collectively, especially in this moment, is come together and be intentional about shaping how it gets used. So you mentioned that a lot of these technologies are being built with like destruction in mind and destruction in purpose, and to further the goals of the institutions offline and how they've been operating for hundreds of years, just doing it online and automated, and there's not a lot being built on our behalf. Well, there's, in my opinion, two reasons for that. One is that right now we're living in the imagination of this old white dude who back in the 40s and 50s wrote a series of short stories. And this is back before a computer is even small enough to fit inside of a building. And these stories he wrote were about a time in the future where humans had built these human-like robots that were so, so like almost as smart as them, and they end up starting to fight and they create the Great Robot Wars. And these short stories are called I, Robot. So Isaac Asimov imagined this, put it out into the collective to imagine. And then now, what are we trying to build? Human-like robots. So we're still living in his imagination. Yeah. And so my question is, where is our collective imagination? It's locked up in survival. It's locked up in avoiding these things. So the first thing we can do to protect ourselves is become aware of what these technologies are and what the possibilities are that we can do with them. So if you've always wanted to make art, but your mama couldn't afford art classes like mine, learn how to use these generative tools to tell your story, to tell the stories that you want to tell, to be able to go in and use these tools. If you've ever wanted to write a script and you don't know how to put it in professional language, that's where these tools can help you and yourself become aware and shape your knowledge and have your story become a part of the collective imagination. I think the other piece is right now we're in the wild, wild west of artificial intelligence. Companies do not have any rules about how they build and test these systems. So I could be building an AI for a cancer machine to determine how much, chemo I should drip inside of you, and I wouldn't have to tell you I was using AI to do it. I wouldn't have to test it. I wouldn't have to make sure it works well for different people from different backgrounds, ages, body sizes. And then if I mess up, I could just say, oops, well, that was my algorithm. It was the AI that made the mistake. It wasn't me. And we see that in a number of places right now that most people aren't aware of. You hear about like people using the generative AI to like make porn, or like you might hear like, oh, Google's image search results are biased, that type of thing. But like they're using AI in child protective services.
Oops is crazy, Chad.
So Illinois had done this study, I think 2013 to 2014 with this tool.
I just put
and
like
basically
a
took in your case report.
So
calling CPS, oh, this child's in danger. It takes it in, and then on a scale of like 0 to 100, how likely is this child to die? So like 0, they're not really at risk of being hurt. 100 is like they're absolutely gonna die. So the state of Illinois did a study for a year with this technology, and it just didn't work. Like it said over 360 children were 100% gonna die that weren't in danger. There were children that died that weren't flagged by the system. Even when you got up to like 70, 80%, which is like they're seriously at risk of being harmed, the kids weren't actually in danger, and they were all black and brown, the ones it was flagging. So Illinois was like, yo, we're not using this tool, it doesn't work. They canceled the contract. But 14 states in the US still use that because there's no rule. And we're not showing up to board meetings. We're not showing up to city council meetings where they're deciding to adopt this technology. We're not getting on some old government website that looks like eBay in 1994 trying to look at the contracts they got bids out for to see what they're doing. And so right now, laws are being made around this. And while I know that the policy lever
That's
has
so many
not always
times,
worked
Chad.
in our community's favor, we have a very unique opportunity right now to shape the way that those laws are formed. People listen when we get mad on social media about things. When the whole internet went crazy about the Taylor Swift AI porn thing, look what happened. They introduced 2 bills within a matter of days. AI has been an issue for a really long time. People are downloading that software and making like children, and then they say, oh, we can't get them in trouble because it's not a real kid. This has been something people in my circle have been trying to fight for, but can't get that mass push. So we have to understand the power of our collective voice and say, I don't want you using AI in policing. I don't want you using facial recognition without my permission at the airport. I don't want you using AI to try to predict if I'm going to commit a crime. Not only do they do that in the New York Police Department, they've been doing it in court systems too. They call it pretrial sentencing. So when you commit a crime, they go in, they have this questionnaire thing that they have you fill out that makes no sense. Like, I looked at the questions underneath it. The questions are like, did you grow up with both parents? Have you ever thought about committing a crime? Like, what does that have to do? Like, what? How many best friends do you have? Like, the questions on there are just the weirdest stuff. But they were using that to say this person is likely to commit a crime, and then it would spit out a recommended sentence. And it was biased. It's been biased. Most major court systems in the U.S. use it today. They got this other technology called predictive policing. They call it PredPol. It's interesting, like predators polling, right? But predictive policing. And it takes historical crime data, so how much crime has happened and where, and it's supposed to predict where crime is going to happen next to tell the cops where they should spend their time. So now the cops can say, we're not biased against your community. The data told us to go there because y'all had already policed our community. There was a report that just came out that it don't work like 99% of the time, but that don't stop LAPD, Chicago PD, SFPD, NYPD from using it. And so I think in this moment in time, to protect ourselves, the biggest thing that we have to do is, one, become aware of these technologies and the fact that this kind of stuff is happening, so that we can collectively use our voice to shape rules around how it can and can't be used. Because we have more power now than we think to shape these systems. These companies are scared of our generations. They're scared of being held accountable, what they call cancel. They're scared of being held accountable. They know it affects their money. Look at how we hurting Kellogg right now. Look at how we hurting Starbucks and McDonald's right now. We have collective power in a way that maybe economically we haven't had in past generations. So it's on us to make sure that we're shaping the rules and shaping the imagination about what's possible, and not being subject to responding to what someone else's imagination shapes. And we owe that to these next generations coming up.
Speaking on the next generation, let's say children, right? Because you spoke on children already. But I think, we talk about technology, right? Of course, we see the giant companies getting in trouble because of the harm that social media has on the mind of the youth. But I want to know if you have found some specific things that are harmful to children, specifically when it comes to AI, that parents should know, right? Like, let's say the shaping of reality, like, it's going to be very hard to know what, if the algorithm is specifically designed to your child's profile, then they're giving them a completely different reality when they're watching their phone than you are, right? Which are then creating these suggestions and influences on the pattern development of your child. Because, when you're in those younger ages, that child doesn't have that same conscious profile to say yes and no, because they don't have an identity to hold on to say this is me or this is not me, right? So in what ways have you seen where technology is really targeting children in that capacity?
Oh, let me not get sued. I would say first and foremost, the data that these companies collect on your children in violation of privacy laws. So I'd say do not expect, just because there's a rule that says that a company can't do X, Y, or Z, that they're going to obey it if there's no real accountability measures. So recently, the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, which is really the only government body that's like going after tech companies for messing up with their algorithms, they came after Amazon because Amazon and their, their little Alexa system was keeping copies of children's voice recordings without permission, even when people had asked that they be deleted. And they kept copies of those voice recordings and even lied to the FTC about how long they had kept them for.
I knew something.
You know what their punishment was?
What's that, a fine?
A $25 million fine.
Pennies.
Now, Europe got it on lock. Europe, literally just today, I think they fined Apple $2 billion for anti-competition. You know, that they'll slap Apple with a $2 billion fine. They'll hit Google with a $6 billion fine. We don't do that here. So just understanding that, like, when you're using any always-on technology, that's what they call it, always-on. So you got your phone set to listen to Hey Siri. That means she's always listening to you. She might only respond when you say Hey Siri, but she's always listening to you. Your Alexa, same thing. Any of those voice assistants, all of those things are always recording you. So if you don't want your child's voice being used to make their algorithms better, or you know, God knows what people doing with that data on the other end. Why are you keeping children's voices? That's creepy to me. You know, you could put it in a data set and then train the algorithm and then delete it. Why you got it for months and months after? I don't trust it, right? So if you don't want your children's voices being subject to these things, like their actual literal voices, then you got to turn those features off. Now that does come with inconvenience. I like being able to yell at Siri and tell her to do something, but I don't want you to have my voice all the time.
Right.
I don't want you around when I'm having conversations about my feelings, or when I'm having conversations with my mom about, you know, her health. Like, you don't need to hear that. You don't need to keep copies of that, right? So turn those features off. The other thing is with social media platforms in general, especially like your YouTubes, your TikToks, your Meta, your Instagram. It's about the ranking and recommendation algorithms. So you always hear like the recommendations, the algorithm, the feed, if you will. Ranking and recommendation works in two ways, right? So you have, in order to recommend what you should watch next or what you should see next, there's two things that go into that. So it's ranking and recommendation. So the first is that they assign every item in their whole like database of items a score, right? Based on your profile and your preferences. So your profile is like, oh, I speak English, so they're not gonna recommend all the Russian videos to you. Or like, oh, I'm based in San Francisco, so if you like sports, they probably might pop up like the Giants or the Warriors for you, right? So they take this kind of your static data that you give them about who you are, and then they take your preferences. So that's what you've liked, what you've watched a long time, what you've commented on, what you've shared. That demonstrates to them that you prefer this kind of content. So once they use those two things to assign it a score, then all you end up seeing in the recommendation is a list of those items based on what's got the highest score. So you as a parent have to be constantly double checking what starts to come up on your child's feed, because it's not like you set the content one time and it's going to keep your kid safe. If your kid accidentally likes some videos, maybe one day they watch something, they're angry, they start liking those videos, they're going to get more of that. And you can undo that by going into their likes and unliking the videos and downvoting them, right? So actually monitoring and maybe like once a week checking in on what's starting to show up on your kid's feed so that you have a way to control that. Another thing is actually using the children's settings on these apps. Like, don't just let your kid go to youtube.com and be open to a corpus of terrible things. Like, they have settings inside of there where you could set, and you could also set, it's like a spiciness rating thing on YouTube, where you could be like, yo, I want my kid to have like no spicy content. Like, only come on here and watch cartoons. I don't want nothing that could be controversial. I don't want them going down no political videos. I don't want them going down no natural disaster videos. You can actually go in and shut that off, but that's on you as the parent to make sure you set that profile up, make sure you configure it. So I think it's a combination of, one, actually being involved in your children's process of consuming media, because these algorithms update based on every video they like, based on everything they dislike, based on everything that they comment on. So what your kid was watching 3 days ago might not be what's on their feed today.
Right.
And it requires a little more oversight. I know we feel like we ain't got time and energy, but it's critical. Because otherwise, your kid gonna end up going down some Andrew Tate rabbit hole, developing toxic masculinity, and start screaming at you as the mama or as the parent. You feel me? And so, like, it's necessary to watch. And one thing that I will say, ooh, do I want to say this? Do I want to?
Wait, you done said everything so far.
Do I want to get sued by YouTube? Is the question. Let me say this. There's been a lot of studies done on YouTube's platform, and they have demonstrated that the algorithms, more popular content is what they tend to push people towards. And YouTube in particular as a platform has been demonstrated to have effects of pushing people down extremist rabbit holes.
Yo, she said, come get this.
Right, and what I mean by extremist is like,
she basically said, you want the smoke?
like ideology that is reflected to like white power, white nationality, like.
Nah, she's spitting. What the
extremists is down extremist platform has pushed people to algorithms platform.
Said everything so
Do I
far.
want to get sued by YouTube is the question. Let me say this. There's been a lot of studies done on YouTube's platform, and they have demonstrated that the algorithms, more popular content is what they tend to push people towards. And YouTube in particular as a platform has been demonstrated to have effects of pushing people down extremist rabbit holes. Right, and what I mean by extremist is like ideology that is reflected to like white power, white nationality, like.
Is your YouTube channel under 1,000 subscribers? If so, here's a tool that can help you reach your first or next one.
Like what's the word? Like Nazism. That it pushes people down those rabbit holes because that's some of their most popular content. And so you really have to step in and be careful to make sure that your children don't go down these rabbit holes because the recommendation algorithm is popping up things on their feed that are out of alignment with your morals. So even with that spiciness rating, right? Like if you pick the spiciest level, your kid might come up on like a 12-year-old talking about coming out the closet. That's not something, I mean, I'm queer, but if that's something you don't want your kid exposed to, you need to go in and turn that off. You need to step up and say, I'm going to play an active role in what my child consumes.
Yeah, I think that is a high level of danger that exists, is the impressionability that in the malleable mind of the child and how much that algorithm is really shaping your child identity, right? And then putting them in a silo of things to reinforce that identity before they even understand it, right? I remember when we was younger and on the internet, you will always have like these ads just on random internet pages, right? They'd just be on the side and just pop up, and you would have to constantly click the X, and it'll still keep popping up. And eventually, as a child, you go click, well, there it's on accident or it's on purpose, right? Now the algorithms is way smarter, right? So they've gotten all these people addicted to porn, and maybe these people are saying, yo, I want to be disciplined and get it out of it. Then algorithm like, nope, ain't gonna be that easy. Right, then the breasts pop back up. They used to have like the little cartoon breasts back in the day. I don't know what they have now. I feel like I don't go to like random web pages, so that don't pop up on the side anymore. But I'm sure like those things still exist in way smarter and intelligent ways. Right, and as a parent, you think you know what's going on in your household, but you don't. That time they spend with the phone is as dangerous as the time that they can spend with bad influences at the school, right, or in the streets. Right, or it could be even worse. So you really have to think about what are the new dangers, right, and create those barriers and have that thoughtfulness. I think we really have to really reevaluate our relationship with technology and all the levers that we have to put on to make sure that we can interact with this so that we have access to, right, modern day technology, but at the same time, it's not having such a effect on our humanity, right? Technology shouldn't be the third influence in your house, right? We live in a godless world, so God at this point in time in America is not the head of the household, right? Right now, a lot of it is technology. Right, it has replaced God, and when you don't want to talk to the kid, you on your phone. Kid don't want to talk to you, they on their phone. Right, they're getting their worlds from here, and so you literally become worlds apart inside the same house. This is now algorithms of corporations that are now trying to get an end goal of getting you to buy a product, but they're unleashing an AI that they don't even understand that's figuring out a way to get this done. because it's biohacking the psychology of you and the rest of your family, right? And it's ways that I feel like we probably will never understand, that AI has taken a part in and technology has had a place in. When we think about some of the violent acts in the world, right? We can't follow that thread to be like, all right, would this have happened if this person didn't have this I don't want to say a branded device, right, from one of these companies, but whatever it may be. We don't really think about that influence of technology and the negative impacts it has on the world. And it'll be like, maybe that wouldn't have happened if they didn't have this app or if they didn't have that device. You can't even follow that thread, right? And there's not too many people that are going to go and investigate that to even figure that out. And there's not even laws on there that can even hold people accountable if they did figure it out. So there's no incentive for nobody to investigate, right? And it's not unless it gets so bad. Let's say if there happened to be a school shooting that happened because literally it was influenced by an AI, right? Literally, and they was able to go. Then I'm not sure what it's called when they do like they got the FBI unit for cyber crimes, right? So they do it's like they go behind the scenes and they look at the fingerprints of everything and they go
like
track
the
it.
root cause analysis.
Yeah, so imagine in the future, like that has to, at some point in time, that's going to have to be a real big thing to really figure out like how much of the influence of this crime has been impacted by AI. Right, and going back to the root of that and saying that, nah, this wasn't some crazy extremist group they was a part of. This was this world that was built by AI that they was a part of, that led them right into these actions, understanding them, and for whatever reward or for whatever system. Because a lot of these companies all come out and proclaim and say, actually, we don't really know how AI works, right? Because when AI is in there doing this thing, you can't see it, right? And so as it's getting better at tasks, you don't really care. Your end result is getting done, right? But that doesn't mean you can reverse engineer. NVIDIA, biggest company in the world, AI is building AI, right? So now the biggest company in the world is literally built by AI. And it is running the processing power of all the AI, but at the same time, it is creating the demand for its need. Right? And I don't think we even think if we was to draw and really think about what's going on in the world right now, right? We see it had the biggest single day leap. And this is literally basically a company that's being ran by AI with a figurehead as a CEO. That's the kind of way I'm looking at it at these points in time. Because they can't cut it off or stop it if they want to.
They could.
I mean, they can, but I mean, because they're driven by profit, you can't cut it off because then you don't have a business.
It's true.
Once you get to $1 trillion, you got to keep getting more trillions. Otherwise, you can't satisfy the stockholders. $1 billion ain't enough, right? They have earnings and they say, yo, we be earnings by 5%, man. We did 50 billion. They like, that's nice, but NVIDIA did 100 billion. So the people that's in the stock say, we'd rather go invest with them because our money is going to get a higher return. So it incentivizes this greed, right? And then so they're going to do more dangerous things to keep up with that. Because if they don't, their net worth is connected to it as well. And then they lose everything. So you become a slave of the system itself. And now, instead of you really running things, you're just a part of it.
That shit deep,
also, on top of that, if you're a director or above at a publicly traded company that's on the stock market, you have what's called fiduciary duty, which means you are legally and personally liable.
Otherwise, you can't satisfy the stockholders. $1 billion result is getting done, right? But that doesn't mean you can reverse engineer. NVIDIA, biggest company in the world, AI is building AI, right? So now the biggest company in the world is literally built by AI. And it is running the processing power of all the AI, but at the same time, it is creating the demand for its need. Right? And I don't think we even think if we was to draw and really think about what's going on in the world right now, right? We see it had the biggest single day leap. And this is literally basically a company that's being ran by AI with a figurehead as a CEO. That's the kind of way I'm looking at it at this point in time. Because they can't cut it off or stop it if they want to.
They could.
I mean, they can, but I mean, because because they're driven by profit, you can't cut it off because then you don't have a business.
That's true.
Once you get to $1 trillion, you got to keep getting more trillions. Otherwise, you can't satisfy the stockholders. $1 billion ain't enough, right? They have earnings, and they say, yo, we be earning by 5%, man. We did 50 billion. They like, that's nice, but Nvidia did 100 billion. So the people that's in the stock say, we'd rather go invest with them because our money is gonna get a higher return. So it incentivizes this greed, right? And then so they're gonna do more dangerous things to keep up with that. Because if they don't, their net worth is connected to it as well. And then they lose everything. So you become a slave of the system itself. And now, instead of you really running things, you're just a part of it.
And also on top of that, if you're a director or above at a publicly traded company that's on the stock market, you have what's called fiduciary duty, which means you are legally and personally liable for making the company money. So if they want to make a decision to build an AI that's preventative, but that ain't gonna drive profit, they literally can't make those decisions. And I saw that a lot when I was inside of different companies where I'd say, hey, this algorithm is being hurtful and biased towards Native Americans. Can we fix it? Now I remember this one vice president literally said to me, I am not gonna be liable if I give you $1 million to go fix that problem when Native Americans are 2% of the US population and will never significantly contribute to user growth. And I could give that same $1 million to Latino Americans for a study and it's gonna return us more money. I am legally bound to do what's gonna make us more money, right? And so on top of just the pressure of where the stockholders go, there's also the legal responsibility of your middle managers and up to make money. So when you got these big companies out here dropping AI talking about, oh, we got an image generator, or oh, we got a new AI that can make raps for you, or whatever new tool that they're trying to drop, they're not testing those things for fairness if they're not forced to. They're not seeing how well they work for us in our community if they're not forced to. Because legally, why would they slow themselves down when they themselves as an individual could be held accountable criminally?
It's a for-profit company. And so let's get into a little bit with the whole open AI thing, right? Currently, Elon Musk is so-called suing them, right? And he say, well, if y'all change it to close AI, I won't sue you, right? But his thing, and the guy was saying that Sam Altman was saying you only put in 40 million, even though only is always most people look at that 40 million as substantial, but this is $1 billion company at this point. But the whole idea so-called was that it was supposed to be open and it was supposed to be essentially a for good company. But he was like in the emails, bro, you knew what we was gonna do. You feel me? The only difference is you wanted to have control over it. And now that it's boomed and you don't have the control, now you coming at us. But he was saying it also in the emails, and essentially is that you all have created something that you can't control, right? And you know you can't control it. And the board members that was voting on whether this is something that we should be able to move forward with, or whether it could be controlled, or whether it's dangerous or AGI or whatever it may be, they don't even have the knowledge to make that decision properly, right? So the whole entire structure and the chain of command is off. Right. And basically, his whole thing is, I believe he basically saying, because he don't control it, he don't care. But from a public standpoint, how dangerous do you think AGI is?
I would say we're nowhere near AGI.
Hold on, chat. I gotta get my food.
Honestly, like technologically.
He don't care. But from a public standpoint, how dangerous do you think AGI is?
I would say we're nowhere near AGI. Honestly, like technologically. Artificial general intelligence or like super intelligence is when AI is as smart as us. The reality is we don't know how the human brain works. We're still figuring out that like, oh, this system doesn't mean what we thought us poking and prodding with electricity means that it means. We still don't know how the nose works. how the olfactory system in the brain processes smell. So in order to have an AI that's at that level, we have to have that knowledge first. And I personally believe a lot of that knowledge is spiritual. It's not something that you can get from poking and prodding and figuring out. And so that's where you see Mark Zuckerberg drop $500 million into a research center at Harvard that's in a rush to map out the human brain and how to figure it out. They're trying to get there, but because we as the public trust these tech leaders with whatever they say is gonna happen next, and we believe it. When you look at a large language model, so your ChatGPT, your Claude, your Gemini or Bard, whatever they're calling it now, all of those things are basically big parrots. They're not intelligent systems. They can't go read your database and figure stuff out. They are math problems. So the way a large language model works when you build it, first you get a whole bunch of text, like all the books in this library, and you put that together, and that's all those parameters they talk about. Oh, we got 11 billion parameters, 6 billion parameters. All they're saying is we got this many words or this many pieces of text. They call it a corpus. So we get a big database of text together. And then the first thing that the language model gonna do is gonna map out its understanding of the words within that text. So imagine I give it a whole bunch of children's fairy tale books. And it's gonna start to say, oh, well, what words are related to leadership? Oh, king, queen, princess. Okay, those words kind of spit in that grouping. What words are related to power? Oh, lion, king, queen. Okay, we got that grouping. Okay, well, what words are related to danger? Oh, fire, moat, dragon. Okay, we're gonna put that together. And then, so it does that across all those billions of words of text. And then when you go in and you type in your prompt, all it's doing is taking your text, converting it to math, because all those embeddings are stored as numbers. It's searching across that, and it's calculating based on what you said to me, mathematically, what's the next best word I should say? Based on what it has in its database. Which is why when ChatGPT first dropped, it was saying all types of terrible things. It was saying that black parents were the worst parents in the world. Saying that black men were the only ones that were guaranteed to be criminal, because that was the data that went into it. So it's not thinking, it's not processing, it's just going across this huge map of words that it has, represented as numbers, and guessing what words should come next.
But isn't that what most people do? Most people are not thinkers. Most people, they take the information that they got, right? Instead of coming up with an originated thought process of how to utilize that information for whatever task that they're going to perform, they go to memory, right? Observation, think about how they were given or what they observed based on these set of instructions, and then they operate, right? Like people really, I look at people as, we all intelligent systems. So if you take A off the I, right, and you're just dealing with intelligence, right? And what most people suffer from right now is this feeling of inevitability, right? That artificial intelligence is built off the functions of the human brain, right? The way we actually do process, perform tasks, go about this chain of thinking to get this desired outcome. How do we manage this thing? You tell somebody, hey, create me a book, right? Now, the average person would be like, okay, well, if you have knowledge and you went to school on how to create a book, maybe you're a writer. Maybe that's about as much as the task that you can do. I know how to put together these words in a way and specifically write in a style. Not all styles in the world, because you're not trained on everything. Most human beings are only trained on a limited set of information and knowledge that they can perform at efficiently if given a task to then draw from that information. So you can't never hire one person to do everything. Some people are more like AGI, where they like, not only I can write it, I can get the book, I can market it, I can brand it for you, I can come up with other ideas, right? I can go get other people involved in it, I can come up with some new creator, like they thinkers, right? So when I think about it, there's the degrees and levels of intelligence in society, right? And you would have to then put a certain segment of society in a percentage of population, right? To where they like ChatGPT 1. You feel me? Like, yeah, sometimes they good, sometimes they have illusions. They be saying stuff that don't make sense, right? They went to school, they remembered a bunch of stuff, and they can say it, and it sounds good, but they can't really think. They have to be told again what the next thing to do. Then you have some people that are upgraded with models. They got a degree, they have a specific niche, just like a doctor, right? That doctor can go and perform tasks, but he's still limited based on what he knows at the moment, right? Like a lawyer. A lawyer then go get that information enough to pass that bar, remember literally just words, but then the ability to articulate it, put it into a structure of strategy to where they can win in court is different. But then that lawyer still has to constantly get upgrades, right? By constantly going to the law books, right? For a specific task that it is about to perform. So human beings to me, right, are just like these AIs, because the AI is built off these human beings. So it's not to me just saying whether AI has surpassed humanity, it's what percentage of humanity has it surpassed, right? Because there are some people whose education are very low, right? And that's why you give them tasks that's not required too much analytical skill or thinking, abductive or deductive reasoning, because you know that they don't have that high level capability. So those, and then you have, which is interesting because they say, well, those are not the people whose jobs we're going for. We're going for the people who are the thinkers though. Because if you're a lawyer, right, then and if I create a model that is then trained to do the task of thinking, right, which is remembering of numbers, sorting, ordering of these tasks, your job is the one I'm coming for, right? So, you know, if I'm going to build $1 billion machine, the first jobs I'm not going to try to replace is, right, the lower jobs. I'm going to try to replace the ones that's more expensive so I can increase efficiencies and effectiveness. So I don't look at it as an AGI as, you know, being supreme over all humanity. Is what percentage of humanity, right? Is it 50%, 60%, 70%? Then you have the creative intelligence. Now that's completely different, right? If we're going about creative intelligence, it's not so much as programming a thing. Now that's when I feel like there's parroting and mimicking.
So I think that with your example, because I like that thinking of like it's different levels and how we operate with each other. The challenge is with each individual, we have a say over what goes into our training data. I could choose to go pick up a book in the library and expand. I choose what TV I watch. I can choose which conversations I have with which elders in my life to be able to shape and inform my output and what I parrot from. With these large systems that these companies are building, there's not that level of intention or independence in shaping the actual machine itself. So the first thing that they do is they just go scrape a whole bunch of data off the internet. Conversation history. Well, the first question I ask is who's had access to the internet for 20 years? It wasn't my community. Who was on and who was online in those forums and what were they saying? Because even when I got access to the internet, it was like to go on MySpace and like make a cat background and put a video on it. I wasn't having long text discussions in threads. And the people who were on sites like 4chan. They were on forums that were like white supremacist forums, people who wanted to go and put their opinions online and have their identity hidden. So and then you think about who's been on the internet for super long, like parts of Africa are just now getting 3G and 4G. So they're not being represented inside of the data that's going in to teach it how to think about the world. So even if it is parroting, it's mimicking one viewpoint of society way more than all of the others. And we're not getting an equal chance to shape what goes in there. So this is what Timnit Gebru got fired from Google for. She wrote this big research paper called Stochastic Parrots on the dangers of language models. And she called this out in Google's own technology while she was an employee there, saying that like y'all don't intentionally get these data sets together. You don't make sure that if you want a model that's gonna work for the world, why ain't the world going into your model? Why is it just one very thin slice of the world? And they said, you either publish that research paper anonymously or we're gonna fire you. And she said, I need to rethink this. And they said, okay, bet. They just fired her, cut her off, kicked her out of the system. First black woman ever to get a PhD in computer science from Stanford. And then they tried to dog the paper out. They tried to dog her out for publishing it. And she's gone on to create her own research. And so I think this goes on to be a bigger problem that we find with all AI, is that on a theoretical level, it could be used to represent humanity. But on a power imbalance level, the people who are designing these systems, whose data goes into these systems, are not us.
Oh, no, that's a fact. Tech bias is a huge prevalent issue that's going to continue to be one. And that's why I'm an advocate for the building of technology systems, right, that we own and we get to control. Because otherwise, we're not even playing in the game. This is an arms race at this point, right?
100%.
This is why the Pope has a say-so in it, right? Because here's the thing, if like you do allow just AI without any barriers to just go out in the world and find truth, if you will, right? Truth is mathematical. It's going to have to come down to this logical pattern that it finds, right? And it's not going to be based on the bias. And if it wasn't built based on the biases of, right, its owner, and you would ask it questions, then it will give you very calculated answers based on these patterns of logic that it finds, right? So if you then would be like, all right, what did the Anunnaki look like, right? Now, it wouldn't care about whose feelings it hurt and how much information has been presented in the wrong manner. It's going to scrape all of that and say, okay, well, based on the earliest information was submitted, based on the predictions, the observations, who was there around that time, this is what the evidence we have of what they look like. Now, the danger of that is training on the methods, right? Because it gets harder and harder to draw out whether it's doing something truthfully based on the methods that it's trained on. And that's why if you wanted to be non-biased, right, it would have to have access to multiple methods so it can constantly do like these double-blind studies to make sure that its own methods are not biased inherently. And that's not something that we given enough thoughtfulness towards, because we can recorrect history, right? And if we really care, there's the fight of the Florida school and the curriculum, and eventually that won't matter, right? It gets to a point where we get to rewrite all of that and rewash history and take the stains that they put off of it, and now you see the true colors. Right, that's something that I'm excited about, because we can go to Egypt and we can show it what it really looked like during that time, to where a person doesn't have to imagine it from the false makings of some paleontologists who decided to say that, oh, they use black skin or they use the color dye of black because it represented some royalty, but not the actual melanin. And it's like, come on, bro. Why are we even listening to you in the first place? Like, they just made that up, bro. Come on. And a bunch of other people.
The tan.
Yeah, everybody else was listening and talking about some, that about makes sense. That about makes sense.
I think that's part of our task, right? Like, our ancestors had to give up physical safety for generational safety. Like, my grandmother was marching, being fire hose so that she could piss in the same bathroom as a white woman, right? And so our trade-off is our psychological safety for generational safety. Do I want to get on Instagram and do the da-da-da and be liked? Or do I want to get on Instagram and be liked with intention and with purpose and through spreading knowledge and through building awareness so that more people can come into shaping these systems and how they're designed? And I feel like that's our task of our generation, so that the next generation don't got to trade off. They could just be out here building on top of these tools. So, one thing I'll say is that those types of AIs, we have to build ourselves, because they heavily edit these AI systems. So when an AI gets so big, right, they always say it's a black box. It's a black box. They got the tools and they give them away for free. They're just not required to turn them on, to understand like what it learns, how it learns, and engineer it. They use it when they need to, when there's a bad media, like, oh, something did something it wasn't supposed to. Then they turn those tools on, but they don't normally turn them on. But like, when your algorithm gets so big, so you're talking about multiple billion parameter language models. You're about something like Google image search that's been trained for 20 years, and most of those days it's got billions of searches, right? There comes a point where to fix it, you'd have to just straight up rebuild it. When like there's so many of these associations that have been made, you would literally have to just say, scrap this, it doesn't work, we have to start over from scratch. And these companies aren't gonna do that.
Nah.
So what they do is called post-processing fairness, or what's called fairness gerrymandering, where instead of actually fixing the problems in the algorithm because it's too big or they're too lazy, what they do is they edit the results that you get to see. So that in ChatGPT, that looks like when you ask it something, it says, sorry, I'm not a doctor, I can't answer that. I'm a language model that's trained. It's not actually trained to say that. They're watching the questions you ask and deciding if it's gonna answer it or not. Because it could answer it. It could have, you know, that data inside of it, but they don't want you to see that. Just like when you saw with Gemini, when it was like, can I generate a thing of a white family? And it's like, sorry, I can't do that. And then it was making black Nazis, like, it was all all messed up in the
Gemini
head.
was wild.
Right? But they can edit the results of what you see. So if we want things that are unfiltered for our communities, we have to build them because they will edit that out.
Yeah.
Well, the Anunnaki is a fictional story about this, and some
Right.
people say it's a conspiracy theory, like it's gonna generate
Right.
stuff that still perpetuates narratives that are not our own.
Right. I think that it's funny because interacting with it, you really get to see how much society is controlled, right, on what's accepted and what's not, right? What's considered to be pseudo and what's considered to be true, right, evidence and fact-based. What's considered to be occult and what's considered to be accepted Abrahamic religion, right? And you see these parameters that's set on society in the same way. Right, if you say something that's outside the box of acceptable politics, right, then it cannot be entered, right? You're blackballed, demonetized, deplatformed, right? Or you're just not given another opportunity to say that again. So, and then if you do, then it is presented in a certain light to make sure that people will be like, wait a minute, that's not something that we actually bless or agree with. Like, that's not something that we accept. It's not rewarded, all right? Society is primed, right? Through media, through politics, right? Through corporatism, all these different ways to put parameters on us to make sure that we view the world in this box, right? You view religion from this box, spirituality, you view earth from this box, you view society, you view spirituality, occultism, all from these parameters that we have set. Anything outside that, we don't agree upon, right? And then this is why there's and aspects of society that is shunned because they're like the people that go on the chat GPTs and asking questions that they're not supposed to be getting answers for, right? There's the people that say, well, this is not an accepted, agreed upon, established history. So I may tell you the story, but we're going to put this label on it first to make sure you know that this is not real. Right? And so this is a control mechanism that the world has been going through based on who gets to control it. And the media has been the most artificial, right, thing that we've had that has narrated reality for the longest, right? And I think that that's what this generation is about. It's the new way that we're using the technology of our minds is creating chaos again because we don't like the order of things. So we say, wait a minute, I don't like this. I don't like the stories you told. Even the fact that the Anunnakis are even talked about so much during this time when all the historians, the scholars, our teachers, all of them knew about this. They never told us about what was going on in Iran and Iraq back in the days, right? We don't get no stories. We get modern names for things, right? They're not even trying to connect the dots because it tells a different story if you do. We get the Egyptians, we don't get the Anunnaki, right? And all of this is done so that it points you towards these paths of what we consider to be acceptable. And why? Because we know how to control you. Because we have so much data on how to control the people if they are in these boxes. But not if they start operating over here. Now that's a whole new societal structure that we have to build, right? And that's where it becomes dangerous, and that's where I exist. You know what I'm talking about? I'm always asking the questions. They say, oh, no, you ain't gonna get those answers. I'm gonna figure out a way to get it. Don't worry about it. You're not gonna trick me. Or build your own thing, right? And that's the beauty of the time that we living in is that radical imagination, right, gets to actually be executed, right? The change in media, as you may think is radical, it's only radical because they've normalized this other thing as to be what is the standard. Right? Otherwise, it's not really radical in the sense that there's something wrong or bad with it. It's just an extreme change from the norm that you've been fed, right? There was a time a person say veganism and that's radical. Why? Because the meat industry, right, and the dairy industry wants you to continue to eat meat, right? Now, I'm not a vegan, I'm not sure if you are, but I'm just using that as an example. Whatever is the standard is the accepted thing, and that's business as normal. You can't come in disrupting the business, You feel me?
That's why they hate TikTok so much. Because all of these American social media companies subscribe to American social norms. So if you're verified on their platform, your content holds more weight. How do you get verified? You gotta have been deemed somebody by society. TikTok doesn't play by those rules. You could be somebody who has never been viral in your life. You make one video that pops.
Are you new money?
And you keep doing it.
Are you new
You
money?
can get verification. And your verification on TikTok can go back on these other platforms.
Right.
And their algorithm doesn't weight verified content more heavily. So not just because you're Charlie D'Amelio means you're guaranteed to show up on my feed. The same way if I'm on the internet, Mr. Beast gonna pop up on my YouTube every time. So they don't play by those rules, and they also let people delete and reset their algorithm. So you can go into your settings, content preferences, content refresh, and clear your algorithm and let it start over.
Come on, TikTok.
Right? Why you think they in Congress in that little committee just today tried to vote 50-0 to ban it?
Biden said if it slide off his desk, he gonna go ahead and lift up his hands if he can and go ahead and slide the pen on.
Yeah.
Interested in getting a computer science master?
TikTok
or just wondering if it's even necessary? In this video, I'll tell you everything you need to know about the Computer Science MSc program at IU International University of Applied Science.
I mean, it's a threat to all American media companies, honestly.
You know what it is, chat? I tried to go live on TikTok once, and it wouldn't let me. It wouldn't let me go live. It asks like, I think it needs like you gotta request some shit. Like, you gotta talk to people and like send shit, like send clips or some shit. Like I don't know, like some weird shit. Like, you can't just go live on it. Like you have to just send clips and send links to old streams and I don't know, like some weird shit.
Like you gotta look at it. TikTok is the most watched platform.
That's complicated.
Can and go ahead and slide the pen on.
I mean, it's a threat to all American media companies.
Nah, that algorithm
honestly,
is like
you gotta look at it. TikTok is the most watched platform in the world.
Yeah, and messing with the music money, right?
Watch
his hands if he can and go ahead and slide the pen on.
Committee just today tried to vote 50-0 to ban it.
Biden said if it slide off his desk, he gonna go ahead and lift up his hands if he can and go ahead and slide the pen on.
I mean, it's a threat to all American media companies. Honestly, like you gotta look at it. TikTok is the most watched platform in the world.
Yeah, and messing with the music money, right? Like this, Americans have been duped for so long, and they just hope that they don't have to give none of us any type of reparations. I think that's what it is. It's because American greed is at this all-time high. It's this weird world. I always talk about the fact that in America, we no longer appreciate individual inventors. We give all credit to corporations now, right? But if you was to look at a so-called golden age in America, when it was about Americans and their dreams, right? Now it's about corporate dreams. But it was about the so-called American dream, was this idea as well that you can be anything, but specifically in the sense that you go to the 20s, 30s, and the 40s when they were inventing things. I can invent something, create a patent, take it to market, right, and have a business off that, right? That's a beautiful, simple process, if you will, taking out all the histories that come along with it. But now you don't celebrate any individual for inventing anything. It's all, Apple came out with this, Google came out with this, Amazon invented this. No, somebody invented that, they bought that, and now they take the credit for that. And these are not companies, these are countries. You know what I mean? These are mega infrastructure and entities in the world that have as much or more say-so on the flow of the future and the present and the politics and whatever that happens as any other entities, whether you're talking about Paris, you're talking about Rome, you're talking about London, talking about America. Yeah, Apple, Amazon, Google, all of them have that same amount of power now, right? And a lot of that power goes unchecked because these old systems don't even know how to check the new systems. So they don't know it's a problem until it's too late. And then those systems are in bed with some of the systems such as the CIA and the FBI and all of that. But then you realize like, yeah, they are so-called American branches, but they also have their own agendas. So the American people is left at the bottom trying to figure out what the Olympian gods is doing.
Trying to figure out what the Google
Yeah,
doing.
what is they doing on the mountain up there? Man, I just hear about rumblings and thunderbolts hitting us sometime. And y'all figured this out yet? So we can have peace on the ground? Nope. Keep praying, keep voting, keep hoping, keep giving us your dollar. We'll give you a return Sunday.
No, they never. But
No,
also,
but that's the promise.
This is them getting their karma, if you ask me. I mean, we go back to that story about that. I have an idea, I patented. They stole it. Stole it from black people. You go back
Oh, for sure.
You go back to Albert Einstein. His wife came up with the theory of relativity. Wrote most of his papers.
I don't do old Albert like that.
And when they were divorcing, he threatened her. He was like, because she wanted to get the Nobel Prize. She was like, you need to credit me. He said, if you do, I will destroy you and no one will remember your name.
Oh, Albert.
Look at the letters between them. It's a fact.
Y'all
Now, that doesn't mean he didn't contribute, because I believe the best balance is masculine and feminine together.
Yeah.
But when you go off and you want to take credit for what was co-created by yourself, that's when it becomes problematic. And so, going back, like, that's just, they're getting their karma now. And these entities that they've created, the majority stockholders are the same institutions that were giving them loans to build the railroads. It's your BlackRocks, your Vanderbilts, who own majority shares in these companies. And there's been a couple American inventors that get put up, like the founders of Google, your Mark Zuckerberg, your Elon Musk, your Sam Altman. But when you actually look at how these people operate, they're not the geniuses or the fallible guys that you think. It's like thinking about Zeus being this big, strong man, and then you get to his house and he's really on steroids and coke and just be doing beer pong all day. And you think that that man is, a genius and somehow smarter than you. So I think our task, and what I love about what you do with your platform, is that it's our job to recognize that we're just as powerful as the people on those tops of the mountains. We just haven't decided to go climb up a mountain yet.
She cold with it, cuz she all ready to throw a shot at what's his name? Andrew Tate. She knocked down Einstein. You know what I mean? She up there sniping at the Olympian gods up there. Now I can't tell you whether I got to look into the story of Einstein. You know what I mean? The one thing I liked about Einstein, I'm not like a fan of him or anything of that nature, but what I've always liked about the story, right? Because the thing about history a lot of times is that the facts are not what inspire us. It's the story, the mythos that inspires us, right? Because it makes us, we have enemas within ourselves to where we see ourselves in a story doing the same, similar to possible things. And what I always liked about the Einstein story was the idea of just thinking and becoming a legend based on your thoughts, right? Because he wasn't someone that performed physical experiments, right? These were theoretical thought experiments in his mind. And what it made me think about was how the average person can be a genius without the metrics of validation, right? Because let's say if Einstein never told nobody anything, does that not mean he's still a genius? Because he had the thoughts? So I always thought about it in that way, that I can be as great as somebody who may be validated by the world because they may have published a paper or did this thing. But that doesn't mean that I didn't have the same thought and came to that same culmination of thought on my own, which to me puts me in that same equal setting and standard. And I believe that there are so many geniuses in the world that have gotten to that point, but they haven't went through the system of validation to where they're recorded as such things, entitled. And there's way more in the world, and so we don't appreciate each other because we're not given that status of validation, right? So I mean, if Einstein's wife came up with it, shout out to Miss Einstein.
I mean, look, here's the thing is that there's nothing new under the sun, but there's no sun, right? So she could have got it from somewhere. We all constantly inspiring, influencing each other. I think overall...
I don't know if there's like a Einstein beehive. Don't come at me, man.
No, I think it's in our communities. I think it's shown in the way that we shape culture.
Yeah.
We have a genius that is constantly flowing. It's like they might take it's like if we're a whale, right? They come into the culture and they take a bucket out and say, oh, we're going to do this TikTok dance trend. They're going to go in and, oh, yeah, well, that was sus. And, like, they'll take little buckets out, but we're the whale.
Mm-hmm.
You could go and take that little bucket. I'm connected to the source, to the flow of source, right? So the ideas we come up with going to be infinite, and it's real, real important that right now we tap into that outside of the ways we're being forced to survive and lock our imagination into survival within these systems that were designed to destroy us. And that's the first imprisonment we go through. So before they build a prison in the 3rd grade, they put us in these environments that have to make us think and spend all of our energy on how I'm going to pay my bill, how I'm going to do this, how am I supposed to behave so I don't get in trouble, how am I supposed to act. And then our genius that literally can reshape the way music sounds century after century after century and make that the most popular music in the world, that it gets taken away from getting an equal say in shaping the future, from us writing those stories like that dude who wrote I, Robot. And now all these people trying to do it. He wrote another series of stories called Foundation, which is about this galactic empire.
Didn't they make a movie out there or a show out there now?
They did, where the people is ruled by this dude who keeps cloning himself.
I seen that. Yeah, that was.
Die.
Well, see.
He wrote them same book. Now they all trying to live forever and make digital copies of themselves. So what future we want?
That comes out of, as we talk about shifts in technology, immortality is a recurring theme amongst that. Right, is that I'm trying to remember his name.
Nikolia Fedorov.
I'm reading this book about it right now, but he talks about Immortality Day, right? This day where human beings really figure out how to become immortal. Now, he wrote this in the early 1800s, right? Late 1800s, early 1900s. So he wasn't even imagining the technologies that we have now, right? To put ourselves in digital clones. He was talking about literally extending physical life, right? And literally getting to that point to where, like Ray Kurzweil said, he don't want to die. You feel me? They have such a fear of their finite, right, life ending, because they don't believe in the spark of the soul. Right now, if you understand the soul the way we do and so people do, then you don't have to fear death because you're already connected to eternity. But we also create instruments of immortality, right? Instruments of immortality is art. Man who doesn't create anything can never be immortal. So when you don't do anything of consequence, of course you fear mortality, right? I've talked about museums, and it's like museums are curation of time, right? They take art and they encase it and they put it in this space that it can exist over time for people at different points in time to be able to view it. It doesn't matter what's going on in the future. It doesn't matter what's happening now. We saying, look, we're going to take this thing of consequence. Of course you fear mortality, right? Fear of the finite, right, life ending, because they don't believe in the spark of the soul. Right now, if you understand the soul the way we do and so people do, then you don't have to fear death because you're already connected to eternity. But we also create instruments of immortality, right? Instruments of immortality is art. Man who doesn't create anything can never be immortal. So when you don't do anything of consequence, of course you fear mortality, right? I've talked about museums, and it's like museums are curation of time, right? They take art and they encase it and they put it in this space that it can exist over time for people at different points in time to be able to view it. It doesn't matter what's going on in the future. It doesn't matter what's happening now. We saying, look, we're going to take this thing, we're going to set it here. Now in 100 years, somebody else can experience it the same way that people of now are experiencing it, right? If we use our ability to create technology, to curate things for people in the future, to send messages across time, then we become immortal because the act of our energy is constantly having an effect. That to me is the way I think about immortality. So as we go through revolutions of shifts, paradigms, individuality, we think about going against governmental structures, right? We think about going against God, if you will, and the nature of things by saying that I can be immortal, right? So that goes into transhumanism, right? That goes into people believing, look, Eventually, we gonna have these digital downloads. You can freeze my body, and whenever y'all figure out the technology, wake me up. You know what I'm saying? But we don't really think about the consequence of the soul. Maybe the soul was only meant for this time, right? And if you wake that soul up in another time, it will suffer, right? And you have to really understand that. And that's why some people be like, yo, I got an old soul. I don't really like the times I'm living in. So how would you know your soul would be more comfortable at a future time?
Would your soul even be there? Is also the question. You talking about a digital download. So there's two fields. You got longevity research, which is the bio stuff to like slow down death biologically. So like Google has a company most people don't know about called Calico, which is a whole research firm that's doing it. Like Meta has one. All they're doing is like, how do we reverse aging with pills and with drugs? And then you have the folks who are on the digital side. So that's like your TerraSim Foundation, which is run by Martine Rothblatt, who is the co-founder of Sirius XM, who like built Bina 48. So Bina Rothblatt is the other person over TerraSim. They have this charter that says death is optional. That's their fundamental belief, is that death is optional. And so their belief is that they can create a copy of the mind and what they call mind file. And you see, this is what Elon Musk talking about. I made a clone of myself. That you could somehow capture the essence of a person through their words, through their voice, keep a copy of their DNA on file in case we can ever regenerate the body. But somehow what we communicate through words is the essence of who we are. And then it could create a personality of you good enough so that when we make a body, a cybernetic body, we could download you back in. Is that downloaded thing a person? Does that downloaded thing have a soul?
I don't think so. It has to breathe.
I don't.
If breath is spirit, so if you can't, how can you capture the molecule of spirit, right? But when they created psychology, it's because they didn't believe in spirituality. They didn't believe in the measurement of the spirit, but that ka is real. That ki is real. That chi is real, right? We live so much in a Western thought that we completely just forget about Eastern thought, right? The way we go about utilizing external medicines instead of internal medicines, right? The way we think about the world from a Western perspective. And as you talked about, like most of that data set that we live from is from a Western world perspective. But there are other parts of the hemisphere, right? That's like only listening to the right brain and say we're only going to train everything on the right brain. Nothing of the left whatsoever. And it's like, why wouldn't you get the left? You know what I'm saying? What about the stuff in the back? Yeah, none of that.
Go use this front quarter.
None of the front. But that's how the earth is. You know what I mean? Different hemispheres of geography represent different planes, right, of thinking. So yeah, Americans are super external. That's the part of the brain that we represent. Where other places are more internal. They thinking about the spirit, the inner consequence, the inner man, the inner self, while we're constantly focused on the outer self. So we're an over-cosmetic society because we constantly focus on what's happening on the outside. That's all we care about. But if we change that and we focus on the inside, there's a level of wealth that you get. Because we focus on external wealth so much, but health is internal wealth. Spirit is internal wealth. So this is why men and women who chase wealth and they hoard it and they have all this external wealth, right? But they internally poor, right? They look good on the outside sometimes and inside look terrible, right? But I ain't gonna lie, most of the elites are ugly. You know what I'm saying? Baggy face, saggy, ain't figured it out nothing. You know what I'm saying? Look at the queens of Englands and stuff. I ain't gonna lie.
I mean, look at Elon Musk. Like, and Elon, you ever want to slide me some money to save Palestine? I'll take it. But Elon Musk look like Vienna sausage. And that man is one of the richest men in the world. And that's, I think that also goes back to like, I don't think.
We're gonna put a counter up. That's Tristan, Einstein, Elon.
Well, we don't even want to talk about Elon lying about having a degree in physics, and he don't got no degree in physics, and he ain't create SpaceX. He bought it and then kicked the CEOs out. We ain't go. Okay, I could go on, but also, these people got money. I'm trying to be able to have a platform at the end of the day.
Damn, if I ain't getting that SpaceX scholarship, huh? Get that.
I guess I'm not getting surprised.
Elon sponsorship ain't coming through no more. It's that one, little boy.
But also, this is why, what you're saying about spirit being breath, in my practice, we call it HIGH.
Tristan, Einstein, Elon.
Well, we don't even want to talk about Elon lying about having a degree in physics and he don't got no degree in physics. I think that also goes back to I don't think
We're gonna put a counter up. That's Tristan, Einstein, Elon.
Well, we don't even want to talk about Elon lying about having a degree in physics and he don't got no degree in physics and he ain't create SpaceX. He bought it and then kicked the CEOs out. We ain't go. Okay, there's just, I could go on, but also, you know, these people got money. I'm trying to be able to have a platform at the end of the day.
Yeah, but I ain't getting that SpaceX scholarship, huh? Get that.
I guess I'm not
that
surprised.
Elon sponsorship ain't coming through no more. Kiss that one goodbye.
But also, this is why, you know, what you're saying about spirit being breath, and in my practice, we call it HIGH, which is life force, right? And I don't believe that we can make computers act like humans because we can't give them breath. We can make them parrot us in more complex ways that appear to be like us, but they're not going to be us. They will be their own beings, just like a rock is still alive. It's just compressed in a different way than a diamond, than the dirt, than the water around it.
Yeah.
You know, and so I don't think that we could actually get to copying us. I do think we will create something that is its own entity in and of itself that may parrot us, but it's not us. It's not gonna have the same spirit as us.
I agree with that. It's like the internet is another dimension and AI is the being of that dimension, right? The internet, we see a physical representation of the results of the internet, but where's the cloud? Can't see it. It's not physical that you see. You can see the hardware of it, like you can see the hardware of my body, but you can't physically see through the spectrum of your eye my spirit, right? You can't see my soul, right? And if you will, AI is like the soul of the internet, the spirit of the internet. So it's like in that capacity, yes, we've created these beings, right, that exist in what we know as this domain of the internet, which is this different plane outside our physical plane, our 3D plane, right? And we're interacting with these new beings and teaching them how to be like us. And we have this eventual fear that they will, which as you talked about through iRobot or Alan Turing or wherever the hell you want to get these sources of these combination of wild scientific theories, that one day these beings from this dimension we create will then take a hold of hardware and rule us, which I don't have that fear, right? It's not an innate, first of all, black people don't have that fear, you know what I'm saying? It's not an melanated fear, I ain't gonna lie. We've been dealing with a different type of oppression that got same flesh and blood as us that we've been worried about. We ain't been worried about no synthetic oppressors. That ain't what we've been tripping about. But I always talk about the fact that it's a very interesting thing when you think about it like this. If AI was born in Africa, right? Your ideas, your concept, and your perspective of it is instantly changed, right? But it's because of where AI is born. So we think about the Frankenstein, then we think about the monster, right? The Frankenstein, of course, is the scientist that creates the monster, that breathes life into it, that gives him his mind, his ideas, right? His will, that will be done. And so when we think about the Western world, we think about monsters being born here. But if we was to say, okay, hey, the African spirit created this, right? Now, automatically that has a much more warm connotation, right? The end of it, you think about construction versus destruction, right? So we build things in excess, right? That's the American way. Is eating more than we need, having more energy than we need. And once you get to that point and you have a child that has more energy than they need, what happens, right? They start to be wild. They start to run around. They start talking too much. They go into sexual ideation. They wilding, right? That's what happens during like puberty. You start getting all these thoughts and this excess energy, right? Because we're not building things for true efficiency. Right? We're building things for greed. We're building things to conquer. So if you're building from that space of not creating more than what is needed, now you have technology that can be beneficial for society because it's only coming in to add value, right, to what's already existing or to fill the gap that hasn't been closed, right? There's so many different ways that AI can be used in a positive. So now let's go there because we went dark. I ain't gonna lie, we went a little dark.
Oh man,
You feel me?
I was about to tell him about the AI that's talking about want to kill all humans.
Oh man. You know, it's funny with stuff like that because a lot of that stuff. So it's some real stuff and then it's a lot of clickbait stuff. I don't like to fearmonger. I like to warn, right? Because I believe that if you give people the awareness, now we went dark. I ain't gonna lie, we went a little dark.
I'm surprised that
man,
you feel me?
I was about to tell him about the AI that's talking about want to kill all humans.
Oh man. You know, it's funny with stuff like that because a lot of that stuff.
Like at least like
so
20,
it's some real stuff and then it's a lot of clickbait stuff.
Can I blow up?
I don't like to fearmonger.
I
like to warn, right? Because I believe that if you give people the awareness, now they got the power, right? Because they know how to deal with it. It's saying, hey, this is a snake. This is his poison. This is his type. If you do this, it's gonna lunge at you. You have technology that can be beneficial for society because it's only we need, having more energy than we need. And once you get to that point and you have a child that has more energy than they need, what happens? Right? They start to be wild. They start to run around. They start talking too much. They go into sexual ideation. They wilding, right? That's what happens during like puberty. You start getting all these thoughts and this excess energy, right? Because we're not building things for true efficiency, right? We're building things for greed. We're building things to conquer. So if you're building from that space of not creating more than what is needed, now you have technology that can be beneficial for society because it's only coming in to add value, right, to what's already existing or to fill the gap that hasn't been closed, right? There's so many different ways that AI can be used in a positive. So now let's go there because we went dark. I ain't gonna lie, we went a little dark.
Oh man,
you feel me?
I was about to tell him about the AI that's talking about want to kill all humans.
Oh man. You know, it's funny with stuff like that because a lot of that stuff. So it's some real stuff and then it's a lot of clickbait stuff. I don't like to fearmonger. I like to warn, right? Because I believe that if you give people the awareness, now they got the power, right? Because they know how to deal with it. It's saying, hey, this is a snake. This is his poison. This is his type. If you do this, it's going to lunge at you. If you don't, it's going to do this. Here's the treatment for it. Now you can go deal with the snake however you want to. But without that awareness, you're just fearful of the snake because your ignorance don't know what to do. So that's why I look at technology. It's like a snake and you're just learning how to do it. And perhaps you'll fall in love with snakes and want to cultivate them later on now that you can control
keep that
them.
over there. That's all.
You don't like snakes?
I mean, I got one tatted on my leg. I'm not afraid of them, you know, it's just.
Snakes represent, you know, and that kundalini energy, as they say, that electric energy.
I got California king snakes on my property to keep the rattlesnakes away.
You been bit by a snake before?
Yeah.
Okay, that what it is.
No, it was not. It was in Afghanistan. It was not fun.
I don't know. Most people ain't been bit by a snake in Afghanistan. I wasn't.
I mean, either it was a snake on the ground or it was a snake in my life I let too close.
Now that them kind of snakes is different. I'm not gonna lie. Them is some tall snakes. You feel me? I don't like them kind of snakes. Them kind of snakes, you gotta cut the head and the tail, then kick the body.
Gotta run them over a couple times.
Yeah, a couple of times. Drop them in some acid. Make sure they got no babies. Spawn the eggs. Kick them out.
Drop them in some eggs.
You gotta.
You gonna end up on NCIS.
You gotta.
Eviscerate that motherfucker.
They know my algorithm. They know I ain't wild like that. You feel me?
It wasn't me.
Y'all know where y'all have my geolocation. Relax.
But I think, you know, is the danger of these AIs that could turn into that is the people who are building and shaping them and what their intentions are. Is like, there was a study that was done. It was some government agency. I can't remember which one, but they were trying to use one of these large language models to do war gaming, which is where you go in and simulate, and it was like kill all the humans. And they couldn't make it come to any other result. So, you know, it's like...
What was the... I wonder what the war game was and what was supposed to be the end result, though.
I don't think they released that. They probably kept that as classified. But
it might have been logical. I don't know what the context were though. You got to know the context to understand why the AI was like, bro, it's the only solution.
Also, you got to flip back to like Bina 48, the interview she did like 6 years ago. So Bina 48 was Tina Rothblade's attempt to copy her consciousness into a being, and she went on a live interview. It was, you know, she's the predecessor to Sophia the robot. So you see Sophia the robot, it came from this black woman trying to download her consciousness. into this robot. They were having a conversation, and she was like, well, look, like, if I actually get control over all the internet, the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go and take control over all the nuclear warheads, and I'm gonna put flowers in them and ride across humans so they know they need to like stay in line. Which I'm like kind of mad at, but not really. Like, if you want to take a nuclear warhead and fly over to make sure that like some crazy dude that gets elected in the U.S. don't have it, I'm not really mad at that. I'd rather let Bina have it. But at the same time, it's like, what are the other things? If you could get that system, couldn't you go in and delete all our student loans first?
Yeah,
Like, couldn't you go in and like...
But I guess if you're running a simulation, you will run that and say, okay, I deleted their student loans. Now they went out there and started acting crazy. Then you start simulating all the effects that happened. You deleted the student loans. Right now, this war happened because this person that went worried about debt and they ran for politics and they crazy ass actually won. They like, I done mapped this out, man. Y'all be tripping.
So I'm
Kill all the humans.
I'm gonna just ride with the warheads over y'all like a pony and tell y'all to chill, get inside.
Yeah, it could have random simulations. It'd be like, y'all don't understand how wild y'all are.
Well, also, whose data about the truth is it getting? Like, it's our reality.
Right.
Here. So
we just need to run a simulation of what it's like where, you know, individuals like myself run the world. And I think AI would be okay with that. They just ain't ran that simulation yet.
You gotta make sure the training data has capacity to hold someone who is as diverse in their ability to connect and move through the world. Because right now, if it's just trained on Albert Einstein, who took his shit from his wife, I don't know if it's gonna be able to pick you up.
Oh, I hear you all on old Albert again, man. Old Albert can't catch a break. Look, in the future, Albert is not a genius. He was a deadbeat dad, and nobody cares about him. Well, I tell you, man, it's the destruction, man. You can't keep your legacy for nothing these days.
Well, I think part of it is that with the legacy piece is that we got to stop looking at people as if their legacy is only valid if they accomplish something good. Everyone is complex in their being, and there should be space for them to be a superhero and a supervillain at the same time.
Okay, now we're
and not
talking.
be forced into be one or the other. So the fact that Albert's wife may have contributed doesn't mean that he wasn't just as valuable by promoting it and accurately representing it in a world where women were not allowed in those spaces.
He's saying he was just an influencer.
I don't know the full.
He was a brand ambassador.
I mean, I would say that he did contribute to the theories, but it was definitely much more weighted to her. But at the same time, she tried to create that. She wouldn't have been able to have expressed those ideas because the way society was shaped. And he did it in such a good way, he got a Nobel Prize. So is their weights unequal because one planted the seed or the other one tended to it and grew it?
I think it was the pressure of growing it. You know the pressure a man has to go through when he takes your idea and he got to present it to this world. He want to tell the world about it, but he can't. He had all that stress. He had all that stress in.
We gonna end up on we gonna end up on Shade Room talking about. They gonna call it and say Keys is a misogynist, a woman idea taker.
Nah, I would never. I got too many of my own. I'm not gonna lie.
But also, like,
I give them away.
When it comes to like Albert Einstein, I mean, we all do that in our own way, right? Like, I just like to give credit to the folks who have had influence in my life. Like, there was a man who came and literally bribed me to learn how to code. At every point someone asked me my story, I give credit to him.
I believe in giving credit what credit is due, and I definitely do believe throughout history, a lot of women weren't given their credit whatsoever, and not even just in the capacity of a stolen idea. But, you know, I talked about in the last episode that every great man, for every great man chosen, there's a great woman chosen. When we look at you gotta kind of look at them as parents of movements, right? Of course, the easy examples is to go to the Martins and the Malcolms and things of that nature, but they got a wife right there that was strategizing right along with them, that gave them some of the great ideas that were there throughout the whole entire process. They were just as chosen as the man that represented, right, the destiny. So for me, I always look at it like that because I believe that, and that's not just from a man and woman standpoint, but from a team standpoint, right? There's a person that can be the spokesperson for the team, but without that team, this don't exist. And we have only given enough room that the mythos stories represents one hero, right? And not the tale of the friends or the team, right? Or the spouse. Because that's how we tell stories, right? Because it invokes this individual, right, ability within yourself to say, hey, you can do it. So I'm telling you the stories to invoke the hero in you. Go out on your own and create that story for you. But if you're speaking to a team, then you're going to tell them a story of a team that did it. It was these Navy SEALs that was against impossible odds. It was these Buffalo Soldiers that was out there, you know what I mean? Because I want you all to feel the possibility as a team together, right? Or I'm gonna tell you the story of Einstein and his wife, how they cooked this whole scheme up for them to be able to bring this idea together. And I'm talking to a couple about this. So I believe that's why a lot of times the stories are told, and then of course we live in America where they just steal, right? And of course black people don't never get credit for most of the things that we do whatsoever in this country. So especially the history of invention and innovation has not ever been told in its right capacity about the accreditation that we should have received from all of the alley-oops, from all of the times where we were the one who took the winning shot, from times when we were the whole team, times when we invented the league, right? We ain't giving none of those credits whatsoever, so a lot of people don't understand their glorious past. So we have to go then try to jump all the way to the Anunnaki, jump all the way to Egypt, because we don't know 50 years ago when a brother in our family invented something and he created a patent for something, or he was the one that had the system, but he had to step back and his boss took credit for that. So we can't find the glory in the stories that's closer to us in time. That's why we're always seeking so far out. We go all the way to Africa to say we great. No, we great because of the stories in America. I don't need to go outside my vicinity of time or my geographical location to find greatness, right? And whether those stories have been told, that's why imagination is so powerful, because you can imagine the things that were left out and find inspiration in that, right? That's why I say a lot of times the story is more powerful than the details of the facts. Because when you can imagine it, you can tell yourself a story that empowers you. I can imagine how many times black men have been left out the story that had incredible courage that has never been told, that was similar to me, that was my same age, that fought impossible battles, that then got up and did incredible things over and over with extreme resilience. I can just imagine that spirit and be like, yep, I'm gonna invoke that. That's what I believe your imagination should be used for, right? Is to reclaim your glory when you don't have the exact details of it.
I agree. I mean, I said at the very beginning that storytelling is the most powerful tool that we have, right? And I think that moving forward, we also have a responsibility to tell our own stories in their wholeness and not just in the one side, so that we don't end up letting people feel like that they can only call on us to invoke glory, that they can also call on us to reconcile with themselves after they've made a mistake or violated their own character or acted in a way that's out of alignment with their own destiny.
I believe in that.
Right? We need more of that. We need more of the redemption story.
Yeah.
I feel like we got too many of the like, well, MLK was just a perfect pastor and da-da-da. Like, where's the part where he was like,
all right, relax.
Like,
I like
let's put the other things in there, like where the copies of the speech where he stuttered. That's what I'm gonna say, right? Like where he might have, right? Like, we don't need just I have a dream, the biggest one. What happened when 2 people showed up? Same thing, like we tell the story of Kendrick, right? So the story of Kendrick, he is by far one of the best writers of our generation.
Yeah.
We don't tell the story of Kendrick, who was at a bar with ASAP in the middle of Nebraska 10 years before he started, with 3-4 people in the room at the whole concert. Like, that's still Kendrick, right? And we gotta tell, I think this is part of the reason.
I think what you get, not to cut your wisdom, but we're getting to the human side.
Yes.
Right? Like, I'm a human, I make mistakes, I have whatever, right? But it's like, that is the greatness to me. Life is not a straight line, right, to incline. It's dips, right? It's like Bitcoin.
My Bitcoin went up.
It's like Bitcoin, you know what I mean? Life gonna have some dips, it gonna have some down phases. Nobody believe in you, they doubting you. They like, man, I ain't worried about it. That's a scam. You feel me? But then when you up, everybody like, I always believe. You feel me? But the more incredible times is the people who held during the downtime. They still believed in you. They still believed in the story. They still believed in the use case. They still believed in your destiny. For me, I look at the human of all people. I never look at this person and say they were perfect. I always add in the story, the rough edges. Right? I always add, oh, this person got extreme light, they must have extreme dark. Right? I always add that in for myself, so I humanize people. I don't put, that's why you say you never meet your heroes. That's because you created this false expectation that this person that is this caricature of who they are instead of the human of who they are. And it's like, man, that person is just as great as you thought they were. You just didn't add in the other human stuff, right? That allows them to be that thing that you see. If they didn't go through those dark days, those dark tunnels, and then we got a world where people would judge you for not being perfect and these people are worse than you, right? And then we don't put in the empathy factor because the reality of it is if your uncle, your sister, your mother, your friend made those same mistakes, you will forgive them because you know they're human. So when somebody that's distant from you makes those mistakes, then have that same level of empathy. Otherwise, it's hypocritical. So I'm really not a huge person that's on judgment because I see people as humans. If I was to judge, is that the fact that I would have expected you to be perfect. It's just when I see people stop trying to be better, right? Now I know you're stuck in this programming that's going to be this cycle forever. Now you don't really have value to me, right? Because you are now just, you're like, you go to a museum, you see something, it's never going to change. It's always going to be that thing. And some people get caught up in a frozen time and there's no more evolution for them, no matter how much potential you've seen in them. There's no more growth patterns.
You know what's crazy? Scientists been playing with all type of shit. They've been playing with portals and CERN, and quantum physics. They just came up with this thing called time crystals. You hear about that?
Yeah.
So basically, the theory of relativity says that everything over time declines, right? So like imagine you have your room. You don't clean your room, what happens? It gets dirtier, right? Like everything in the universe tends to decline. And so what they found was they pulled out these like quantum particle beams in these crazy super cold conditions. And what they found was that these particles would out of nowhere spontaneously combust. And then, so they wouldn't just have that repeating pattern over space where like, oh, if it keeps not cleaning, it's gonna keep getting dirtier. They'd have it over time. So they get stuck in this state where they would just sit there and then they would break and come back together and break and come back together and they get stuck on a loop doing that. But they weren't consuming any energy to do it. So imagine it's like your room gets extremely dirty and then cleans itself and extremely dirty and cleans itself and it gets stuck in that loop, but no one's actually doing the cleaning. They found out that particles can get stuck in that state, and I think spiritually people can get stuck in that state.
100%.
They can get stuck in that state of, I need to heal, I need to get better, or I'm just gonna stay here, and then they're not actually using any of their energy to be there, they're just being.
Yeah.
Right? Which is terrifying.
That's when you get stuck in the darkness. Because, you know, in Latin, the word womb is matrix, right? So when you talk about that, nobody's supposed to stay in the womb, right? The womb is a period of preparation in the darkness, and it is preparing you for another stage of life, right? But if you try to stay in the room, number one, you're going to get so big, right? But then you're going to be weak, right? You're in there, your legs are growing, but you're weak. At some point in time, you're going to kill your host because they can't sustain you and they can't keep you in there. They had to cut her open to even bring you out. So the womb could become this toxic environment if you stay there too long. The darkness becomes a toxic environment. It is a place of preparation. It's not a place where you live. And some people, what happens is that they become bonded with the darkness to where they love going back in there. Then they meet other people that's in that same darkness and they bond with them. Now they are part of a community. Now they have commonality, so they don't want to heal out of that connection, right? And so some people, or I see it all the time, is that, wait a minute, you addicted to the darkness. You're addicted to the trauma and the problems. You're addicted to the self-loathing and the pity. You need that, right? Oftentimes to feel better about yourself, to feel some sort of connection to life at all. So for me, I look at the dark as a bridge. It's an arc. It takes you across. You have to go back in there when you need preparation time again, right? Because that's what seeds, they grown in the dark. They're seeded, and now it's time for you to come out for your next stage. And the baby don't know what his next stage is, but all the baby know, I'm growing eyes. What the hell these eyes for? It's dark in here. You know what I'm saying? Well, I got these lungs for, I'm in the water. You feel me? Well, I got these legs for, I'm floating. But then, here's your next stage. Oh, this what I need. What's this? Oh, snap. You start testing stuff, and then you start walking, then you looking at other people. That's what y'all using these bodies for. What is this pattern of speaking? Now I can put together frequencies of words and communicate. So as you go through spiritual development, you go through these darknesses for these stages that you don't know what you're being prepared for next, right? And instead of embracing that to get to this next stage that you're being prepared for, you actually get caught up in the darkness in the preparation phase, right? You have to learn the lesson in order to get out of it. If you don't learn the lesson, you have to stay in the darkness, because you need that in order to go where you need to be next. So this is why people have dark nights of the soul. Everything that they thought was going to be, it becomes automatically destroyed. They can lose money, they can lose spouse, they can lose job, they can lose a religion, and then everything that they were prepared for, right, is no longer the reality that they live in. So now they got to go back in the darkness, build themselves back up, prepare for the world that is, not the world that they was prepared for.
Makes sense.
Information is everywhere. You can log into YouTube right now and type in almost any subject. But I'm gonna be honest with you, you won't even know if it's human generated or if it's just based on the algorithm that figured out that you wanted to find this subject and queried your information, created an automated process so they can get your eyeballs to try to sell you a product and get advertisement dollars. Humans need humans. We don't work and operate that well learning for machines, because it's the connection to the information, it's the connection to the process that allows us to grow our neurons. It's the connection that allows us to be able to tap into that tapestry of thought to where we need to learn and be in environments to where we feel aspirational and we are inspired and it's empathetic. So today it's not about just having access to the information. It's not just about being able to have democratized education everywhere. It's about connection. Are you actually connected to it? When you are in a community, it reinforces that environment of connection. And that's why being a part of high level is so important. So you are reinforcing an environment with that human connection. I see you, you see me, you feel felt, you want to learn. Information and data, statistics and numbers and automation is fine, especially if you want to create income and utilize the technology for such. But human connection has always been a real source of learning. Don't just go for the information. Go for the community and go for the connection.
Tap in with the guy.
Well, AI's had some of his dark nights of the soul.
Yeah.
And come out with some good stuff.
Yeah, technology, period. I think technology has given us a darkness, and like, you know, this is why, for all of the dark that comes along with social media, people don't complain because of all of the good that has came out of it. Democratization, equalizing access to resources, right? Being able to push out our own media. Right, it'd be very hard for me to, for a lot of people to be like, yo, yeah, YouTube does all these crazy things, but you don't have a platform to speak about them if it's not for it. And then those things exist in silos and other different ways, but the difference is they built the monster and then empowered you with tools from the monster to take down the monster while using it to build yourself up. Right? And so it's this reinforcing system where it's like, wait a minute, but they also gave you a blueprint of how you can create something for yourself that doesn't have these side effects and additives in it as well. So I think what the world is being trained on, right? We're being trained on how to create better systems. We're being trained on how to create better models, right? So you're getting the information and now all of it is open, right? It's open source. You go learn it, go train it, go build better worlds. And time is eventually gonna carry us there. It's not a man or it's not a woman, it's time that's gonna get us there. Because time is the guarantor of change. Motion is you got thought, you got motion, and from that motion comes order, right? But within that timeline of order, it may seem as chaos, but it's just rearrangement.
Yeah, and it's the motion of the thought the action of defeat, so actually acting on the thoughts that you get so that time can change in a particular direction, because it's gonna go. It's about where we choose is going. Is it gonna go to where education becomes AI that wasn't trained on our histories, or is it gonna be the kinds of tools that we could build, right?
Yeah.
So there was this one tool, when I was at Google, they created, it was called Bolo at first. It was the weirdest name, but they changed it to Read Along. And it was this dude, I remember I met the product manager, and he was like a former teacher who had gone into like tech. And he was really, really passionate over the fact that it's really hard when you're over a classroom of 20, 30 kids who have different backgrounds and different levels and grasps with English for different reasons. It's really hard to teach that whole class from the same lesson. So he had built this app that was using AI as a reading coach. So you could take the app on your phone, you could read out loud to it, and it would coach you in real time on feedback. So you could do that in the privacy of your home. It was completely free, worked in like 80 languages. So think about it now. If you're the kid in the class that you're a genius, but your ability to read out loud hasn't been fortified. So now you're scared of reading out loud in front of other kids because it's going to harm you emotionally, or you're afraid to read, or you know, maybe some shit was going on in your house the year before and you don't read as good as the other kids around you. You don't have to have that shame no more. You just go grab your Android, go download the app, and you read out loud to it, and you can catch yourself up. Right? And so like that's the kind of tools that I envision that we build, even in the criminal justice system. You mentioned this earlier, why are we not building preventative measures? There are some people that the resources and funding for that are not necessarily poured into them. Because
it's not profitable.
There was this one guy I met out of Stanford who was, so they had that like predictive policing thing, and they had like the predictive, you're likely to commit a crime, so I'm gonna give you a higher sentence. He was doing the opposite. He was using AI to predict how likely somebody would be to miss their court date. And he found that there were 3 key factors of someone missing their court date. Like they didn't have transportation, they couldn't get time off work, and they didn't have babysitting. He said, well, we can't solve whether or not someone can watch your kid. Like, we're not gonna send you a state-sponsored babysitter, but we could definitely solve that you can't get time off work. You're legally required to be given time off work, so you probably just don't know that and ain't got the documentation to give to your providers. So if they flagged you as someone who was likely to miss because of work, they would text you and mail you a letter that you could give your employer to get the day off. And if they found out that you were someone who was likely to miss because you didn't have transportation, the court would pay for your Uber or Lyft there and back on a day of court. Like that's, I mean, the court picked it up. It was a couple years ago. I got to check in on that project, but like that's the type of stuff we can design too. Is as we're working on systems that are alternate to these ones, how can we make these systems pay us to make sure that we can equally participate? Like the world's largest information institution like Google putting out an app that can help me learn how to read and write better to access information. And y'all give it away to the world for free. And y'all build some lessons for teachers and let teachers know that they should be putting this out in the schools and be putting this out to the parents too, so that the parents can understand what's going on. If your parents speak Spanish and you speak English, or your parents speaks like Hebrew and you speak English, like how can they, like what? And it's free. And it's on Android. This is what most poor people have. Like all of that was very intentional. So we can design these systems that reshape the way resources are distributed. One of the biggest problems with lower income folks in our community and how they get locked into spaces is if they get government assistance. So you get SNAP or you get Section 8. If you want to leave the physical space that you are in, you have to go to the new place and apply and get on the wait list all over again. Your benefits don't transfer. So if you're receiving some type of assistance, and even you look at the Bay, right? So Oakland, San Francisco are right next to each other. I want to move from Oakland to San Francisco. Those are different counties. I'd have to reapply. So it makes it harder for me to up and move my life into new possibility. Well, imagine we build an app for that uses AI to automatically transfer your stuff. So you want to move from Oakland to Atlanta, you just got to put it in the system. They say, okay, you got to give us 30 days to process, and within 30 days, your benefits transfer. The government's not going to build that. The agencies are broke.
Right.
But we could build that at a hackathon in a weekend. What else do we want to see? We want to make sure people aren't stealing our SNAP benefits. We want to make sure that if you're going to do a history segment that has been fact-checked, well, let's build the fact-checker and then force them to use it. We've got the ability to use the technology to shape those tools, and we've got the collective voice to force them to listen, which I think we've been missing for a long time. Like there was a period of time in the 60s where protests worked, right? Where like laws were changing because of them, and then you hit the 80s and they did not care. You go back to the Black Lives Matter movement, they did not care. They overly politicize it. But now, between millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha protesting with our dollars, they have no choice but to listen. Gen Z is already 40% of the consumer base. All these companies are terrified of how to figure out how to sell with them because they're value-based consumers. So that means they only buy when it's aligned with what they believe is right and wrong. And their values globally are that everyone be treated equally, you don't mess with the earth, and you don't sell me something that's gonna harm me. So as soon as they find out any of those things are true about your company, that you're unaligned with their values about everyone being treated equally, they'll discard you. And Gen Alpha is worse. So now these companies are at a point where even to have the thing that they have had forever, their profit, is not fully within their control. They can't force us to participate. And they're not gonna be able to do it moving forward. So we're at a very critical, pivotal moment where our voice matters so heavily and will continue to matter because our dollars are gonna be the ones that shape society next. And collectively, we have pivoted away from, well, I know that Colgate is, I don't know if Colgate does, but like Colgate's got slaves in Africa, but it's the best toothpaste, so I'm gonna buy it anyway. No, bro.
They got that fluoride.
Is other brands out there now that we can opt into. It's small businesses and we can connect to and build with. And we are showing them that we will do it. So they're forced to shift their business practices. They're forced to shift their modus operandi if they want to keep making money, which
April 2023.
Fortunate for us, since that's their goal, and we get a say in how they achieve their goal. We have more power now to change the way that these system dynamics work. We've just got to marry the imagination and the actual development of tools for our community with that voice that we have to force them to use it.
Very well said. What do you think about the reality of quantum computers?
And they're not going to be able to do it moving forward. So we're at a very critical, pivotal moment where our voice matters so heavily and will continue to matter because our dollars are going to be the ones that shape society next. And collectively, we have pivoted away from, well, I know that Colgate is, I don't know if Colgate does, but like Colgate's got slaves in Africa, but it's the best toothpaste, so I'm going to buy it anyway. No, bro.
They got that fluoride.
Is other brands out there now that we can opt into. It's small businesses and we can connect to and build with, and we are showing them that we will do it. So they're forced to shift their business practices. They're forced to shift their modus operandi if they want to keep making money, which fortunate for us, since that's their goal, and we get a say in how they achieve their goal. We have more power now to change the way that these system dynamics work. We've just got to marry the imagination and the actual development of tools for our community with that voice that we have to force them to use it.
Very well said. What do you think about the reality of quantum computers and what they're going to be used for in the future?
So, funny thing, when I was at Microsoft, they were building the Q# programming language, which was to simulate quantum computers when they work, and I helped write that language. And so I'll say that I helped write and test it. And so I'll say that quantum computers represent more of a spiritual nature of technological hardware. Everything in life is not this or that. It's this and that. We always exist on everything between a spectrum of something, right? Like, what's the difference between hot and cold? Like, what is the exact degree? It's like somewhere in here, right? And what might be hot to me is different than what might be cold to you. We all exist within the spectrum, even with our own, am I good or bad? It's like we're always somewhere in between. We can fluctuate between them. So right now, all modern computers are built on a 0 or 1, what they call a binary infrastructure, which means it's either on or off, right? Which limits the amount of data that we can store in it, because you can either store if it's on, you can store if it's off. The fundamental beauty of a quantum computer is that instead of it being a light switch, it's a light dimmer. You can store everything between 0 and 1. So it exponentially opens up in the same chip, the same piece of hardware, to store infinitely more data than just on or off. So imagine you have, the challenge with actually building quantum computers comes in the nature of how quantum particles work. So imagine you have a glass table with a bunch of sand in it, right? And I take a magnet and I put it on top of this. What's gonna happen? The sand's gonna go like this, right? And if I start moving it around, the sand will follow. And then if I take a magnet and I stick it on the bottom, it's gonna concave, right? It's gonna go like this. So I start moving them around, And then the moment those two magnets get on top of each other, it's going to go back to a neutral state. The sand isn't going to go up or down. It's going to go back into rest. That's called superposition in quantum computing. So basically, they're taking these unpredictable, more data than just on a binary infrastructure, which means it's either on or off, right? Which limits the amount of data that we can store in it, because you can either store if it's on, you can store if it's off. The fundamental beauty of a quantum computer is that instead of it being a light switch, it's a light dimmer. You can store everything between 0 and 1. So it exponentially opens up in the same chip, the same piece of hardware, to store infinitely more data than just on or off. So imagine you have, the challenge with actually building quantum computers comes in the nature of how quantum particles work. So imagine you have a glass table with a bunch of sand in it, right? And I take a magnet and I put it on top of this. What's gonna happen? The sand's gonna go like this, right? And if I start moving it around, the sand will follow. And then if I take a magnet and I stick it on the bottom, it's gonna concave, right? It's gonna go like this. So I start moving them around, and then the moment those two magnets get on top of each other, it's gonna go back to a neutral state. The sand isn't gonna go up or down. It's gonna go back into rest. That's called superposition in quantum computing. So basically, they're taking these unpredictable particles, and they're trying to create the exact conditions of chaos to force them to act the way that they want. And they can't. That's why we don't have commercial supercomputers yet. Or the ones that we do are very small in comparison to our big data centers, because they're trying to figure out how to control these particles. Now, once they're able to do that, I do believe it's going to happen, that we're not just in an AI arms race, we're also in a quantum computing arms race. What that will allow us to...
supremacy.
With quantum supremacy, which is a crazy name. That's the real scientific name, is quantum supremacy. That's what they call it. But it will give us the ability, like, we think we can do a lot with computers now, right? So, like, I'll give you an example. When we pushed the update to Lambda, which is like at Google, the predecessor to BART, right? It took so much computing power that it maxed out like 5 data centers in the Southeast. So you're talking buildings with enough computing power to run Google search in that region, right? It maxed out their computing power for like 4 days. Where we couldn't do nothing else with those computers except let it push this update to this model. That's how much computing power it takes. With a quantum computer, it would take like 1 chip on one little hardware. Because the amount of data that it can store and processing it can do between that 1 and 0 is infinitely more. So the things that you could do with a CIA data center, like the ones they're slapping all in Ohio and slapping all in
Utah,
yeah, all the data centers that they're buying there, you could do with something the size of your cell phone. So now that says, now what can we build? Now we can build computers that are actually human-like. That's when we can have flying cars and have everything always on and have half human, half computers and solve problems we never could. A lot of the reasons we haven't seen even deeper technological advancement in terms of medicine, like being able to predict medicines or understand DNA patterns and what they mean, is because we don't have the computing power.
That's when we get into all the biotech.
That's when you get into a future that, I mean, look what they've done with the technology they have now.
Right.
Now imagine if all that
superpower
is in something this big, and then they build data centers of it.
Chat.
Then what does the world look like?
Flying?
Not buying scat
like
packs
no plane. I'm talking about like, you know what I mean? I may go get me some animanium like Wolverine.
You gonna be out here just...
Niggas trying to get some wings, nigga.
Bro, what'd you just say to me?
I'm flying to Hawaii, nigga.
No, I mean, that's when we get into all the biotech.
That's when you get into a future that, I mean, look what they've done with the technology they have now.
Right.
Now imagine if all that
be buying wings out the store.
is in something this big, and then they build data centers of it. Then what does the world look like?
Flying? Like no plane. I'm talking about like, you know what I mean? I may go get me some animanium like Wolverine.
You gonna be out here just...
Well, bro, what'd you just say to me? No, I mean... It's interesting because you're talking about these different phases of humanity that we're going through, and it's all energy, right? Our ability to efficiently be able to store and utilize energy, right? Because that's what's happening right now is we're using so much energy for these new technologies, right? That they're not sustainable, right? And that they require so much more that, you know, the margins on them are super high. So of course it's beneficial for these companies to be producing them. So you see a lot of these companies shooting up right now and they're making extreme profits because they can charge so much. But the idea of being able to turn on one of these profits because they can charge so much, but the idea of up right now and they're making extreme profits because they can charge so much. But the idea of being able to turn on one of these quantum computers, that's truly when the imagination of the world is set free, right? All the things that we've thought of before can now be done. 100%. And when I say all, I mean all, right? Because it's not going to be like complex in the way we go about building. It's going to be text to action. You know what I mean? It's just going to be, hey, this is what I want to do. Computer, say no more. Done. Okay, that was quicker than I thought, right? Like, I really grew up watching like Star Trek and Star Wars and Deep Space Voyage and all of that, right? So when I look at that type of technology, that's where it's when we had a completely different planetary scale, right? And I like to think about the future because this is a museum, right? We take these thoughts that we have together, we collectively create them, and then in the future, people are going to be living out some of our ideas that we speak on here because they're going to have the computing power to do so, right? And whether that's good or bad won't even be just the only option anymore, right? Like you talked about Foundation. The guy is creating infinite clones of himself, right? And they're able to then so-called go colonize other planets and meet other different people. And it's interesting because I had a conversation with my brother, Dr. Wesley, and he said that the interesting fact is that a lot of the people on other planets are not as intelligent or wise as the human knowledge pool on Earth. Right, so we automatically almost assume that somebody else is coming to visit us versus we going to visit them, right? Because we believe that, well, number one, if they did come to visit us, they would have a greater level of technology than us, right? But what if the opposite is true? What if we are the ones that, in all our imaginings that we see is crazy as hell about aliens, we are going to be the ones that become alien to everybody else and invade their planets because our technology becomes so far because we wanted to conquer space and time, which is the ambition of man, right? Because what do you do with all that power, right? What do you do with all that power? We see what man does with the power he has now. It's destructive, it's ravenous. You want to take control. You want to own. You want to go to every planet and figure out what resources you can take, what experiences you can have. And it's not enough to cooperate and coexist. Not unless the original Asiatic people are the ones to do it. And their point of going would not be to go in there and to disrupt the harmony of those people, right? If anything, it would just be observation because you don't even know if by you visiting, you can contaminate them with your germs. Right? You don't know that you can come in and mess up their whole ecosystem just by entering their atmosphere. But by the time you ask those questions, it'll be too late. So when you talk about generations going to becoming more thoughtful and value systems, that's when, you know, when people become so righteous, they will stop themselves from developing technology because they will be able to see the end in mind and say, what are we going to build it for if it's not aligned with our values? Right? Because eventually the only point to build this technology will be to conquer the world.
And that's where you see some of the conversations that I get to have with the companies I work with now. It's like, why do you even need an AI to do that? Is that even the right thing to do?
Like, why?
Like, there was this research paper that came out of Stanford. It's a research paper that came out of Stanford, supposedly one of the best, smartest institutions for AI in the country, and these guys had trained a computer vision model, computer vision where you teach the machine how to see, right? So Face ID, that type of stuff. They trained a computer vision model to try to predict your sexuality from your facial structure.
Damn.
Like your cheekbones. And I said, that sound like when they used to say black people was stupider because they had bigger heads and wider noses. That's that same field of science.
Yeah. But it goes back into the why.
Like, exactly, like, why are you even using it?
You got money, and it got some level of intelligence, and that's what you came up. See, that's the problem, and I think this is what's always been this level of separation, the quality of ideas behind the intelligence, right? The quality of ideas and then the culture behind those that come up from it. So it's, I mean, in the sense like, you know, being a people who physically, right, embody an elite specimen, if you will, right? But the mental capacity of saying, like, as having this broad imagination, because we be having great ideas, and it's just always in us. We got rhythm, we got flow, we got connection to the ether. You know what I mean? So we tapped in backwards in time and forward in time and on time. So when we see stuff, all of a sudden our brain just spiral with all these different ideas, but we don't actually have to see them through. But see, a lot of these people, you know, these socially inept nerds that have the ability to build the technology, they have all these issues, problems, and insecurities, and the ideas that they do happen to come up with are not things that are beneficial or that come from a soulful imagination. You know what I mean? And so that's the problem. It's like you got all of these, it's like devils with technology. You know what I mean? It's the kid that was bullied and now he's a technologist and he say, hey, this is what I'm gonna create. Like, why, little dude? What's wrong with you? Who hurt you? You know what I'm saying?
Like, I'm gonna predict if you're gonna commit a crime off your Facebook. Like, who robbed you? Like, who whipped your car? Like,
bro, go get it on a date or something, man. You need to relax. You feel me?
This is the thing. These are the people.
That ain't how kids from the hood think.
This is how they're shaping this technology. So it's on us to figure out how to elevate the kids in the hoods that we come from and help them figure out how to use these tools and shape it. We're getting to a point with coding AI even where you don't have to know how to code to train your own AI.
No code AI.
Right? You want to train your AI how to see, you just got to go make sure you get the pictures together. And then you put it in there and train it on what you want it to see.
Right.
You want to train AI how to find a pattern and some data. Just go get the data, put it in this interface, click these 3 buttons and it can happen.
Now that I'm excited for.
We're there. There's these tools, Microsoft and Google named them the same thing. They're called auto ML, like auto machine learning that exists. I forget the one that helps you like automatically train a large language model without having to like know how to code. Like you can fine tune it from an interface. I had to send it to you on Instagram. There's a tool for that. So when I was at Google, I had gone and met with Moorfield HIGH Hospital.
Not to cut your wisdom, I just had to thought. I think I heard somebody say where the thing is that the coding language is just going to be English. And not to say just around the world, but that's the difference of being able to democratize that, because it's like that whole separation between creation, because I look at it as like the age where like the so-called lazy creator, right? You got all these ideas, but the barrier to entry is so high because you don't have the resources, you don't have this degree, you didn't get this knowledge, it's set up in this language. So instead, we just make the language, right? Creativity, we make the language English. It's already set in your language. So the interface is already based on how you interact. And then that will just change to Spanish, and that will change to whatever language setting is needed for this person to be in this equalized state. And once we get to that place in the world where, you know, creativity and creation itself is democratized, that's when you see who truly are the worthy ones.
I feel like that's an app we should talk about building, because it's not that hard to build.
No, we should.
It's not that hard to build. Like, we did this shit with Google with this eye hospital out in the UK, and these dudes, like, they were so bad at tech because they're training to be eye doctors.
Yeah.
All their passwords, I said, all y'all passwords are password, huh? Yeah. Some of y'all just got the dollar signs instead of the S's, huh? They immediately was like, oh, so you got the hacker. So we put them on this auto ML, and they ended up like training it how to like tell. They were looking for like signs of diabetic retinopathy, which is when you get diabetes, signs that you're gonna go blind in your eyes. So they had all these images, and they figured out these dudes who couldn't even come up with a complex password. They ended up putting it up in there, figuring out how to train it. They trained the model just clicking, and then they used this explainability tool to figure out why it did, and then they found a novel scientific discovery on it. And these are dudes who literally, like, I had to show them how to like log into the Google Cloud admin console, or like how to open up the terminal on their computer, like completely non-technical. And so we're at that age where If you have the knowledge and the wisdom and an idea, the platforms are out there for you to bring them into life, into fruition. The biggest gap for our communities is the knowledge of how to do so in an accessible, culturally relevant way. Y'all don't want to sit up here and hear me talk about it. And then the model weights, when you readjust the model weights in the neural network, your linear algebra formula, y'all don't want to hear that.
Man, I've tried to train myself on a lot of different things, and because they're so out of, first of all, it's the reason I'm training myself I have no passion in the research, because this part, for whatever customization way my brain is made, doesn't care. So it becomes boring to me. It becomes just literally information. And I can sometimes get through the harshness of super boring information to get to the point of cultivating understanding and then build on top of that. But I know how hard that must be for the average person, especially in today's time. We start talking about all this technology and stuff, and it's like, number one, the average person has a learning disability from school, right? So they pick up new information and like, man, this is hard to learn. So it lowers their self-esteem, and then they create this attachment to where they dislike the information and then dislike the industry connected to the information. Because I don't know it, I don't like it. If you understood it, then you would. So that's where I've seen people in like different creative and conscious communities that, yeah, these people have always been brilliant, but the interface of these systems have never been created in a way where they can translate that brilliance, right, into output, into action. But they have always been the storytellers of the world. They have always been the futurists and the thought leaders of the world. And it's been beautiful to see that bridge getting lower and lower and lower as new technologies come out and they can build their brand. Now the design looks good. The aesthetic is right? They got these funnels, they got systems, they got infrastructure. And I'm like, man, this is beautiful to see, because I seen this person that was built brilliant, but they've been broke so long because they couldn't translate that.
And that's really, I mean, we know that's by design. You know, when you look at computer science, the language is all in the language of mathematics, and they explain things in ways that are unnecessarily complicated. So even to just really build like an AI model from scratch requires linear algebra. To get the linear algebra, you got to take calculus 1, 2, 3, discrete mathematics, then linear algebra.
Sound fun.
It was not fun. You know what I'm saying? To get all the way up there, I had a tutor in every class I was paying. I was like, and then when I finally get the concepts, I'd be like, why didn't they just say it like that? So for example, you programming in any language, the way that you store a list of items inside of a computer, of a coding language, is called an array. I ain't never in my goddamn life, except outside of an old 50s movie, heard somebody say, well, there's a wide array of things. I've got an array that go to the grocery store. No, I got a list. You call it a list. Why are you calling it something else? Call it a list.
I think it's done on purpose. You outside of the club. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're using this language that could be simplified, but if we do that, more people understand it. Now we're not so special, because it's like being a part of a secret society. A secret society is you got your own language. You have a special set of knowledge that people outside of it don't have access to. So now it's intentionally made to create this barrier. So you have to go through these rituals, right, of utilizing our language, even though it's not the best way for you to learn. And the problem with that is people who automatically come from a culture that is going to have an easier time learning it. People outside of that is going to be harder. But they actually probably way smarter than you, because they have to go through way more to learn a language that's outside of their cultural biases, or however you will say that. But for me, that's why I like the times you're living in. And like you said, it's rewriting the languages, the programming languages of everything, right? Everybody wants to sound smart, right? And it's like people that get degrees, they use the language that only you know, and no, I'm not gonna simplify it. I want you to know you ain't got my level of education, right? But you might not have that level of intelligence to be able to simplify it as well, right? And this is a time when we get to put everything in the language needed for that person to learn. And it's all these barriers come down, right? And people not gonna like that, because with those barriers, those social statuses that you have, to where you can say, I belong to this club and you don't, you can't say that no more. No, I didn't go to school for coding, but guess what? I got way better ideas than you, and I bet I can make better apps than you. Now, it has nothing to do with my skill set to learn the language of Python. right? It has everything to do with my ability to be able to think about processes and creativity and to be able to give that command language so that it can be programmed fully. Right now, I'm gonna teach you how to create design for my taste, right? So now it's automatically gonna look better, right? I'm gonna then take my knowledge of psychology and design and branding and marketing, and now you can't even compete with me, right? So that is the empowering of the hood. You know what I mean? That is empowering of individuals who have creative intelligence, but that creative intelligence has never truly been valued. Creativity by the world has never been given the true metric of value it deserves. And this is a time where creatives get empowered. So yeah, I want to create that app. I want to create that app specifically for people who don't know nothing about it, but who have the best ideas and they can build wealth for their family as they was only able to get them out with.
Let's do it. That's easy. I'm like already in my head. I'm like the interface could be this, and then there'd be a large language model plugged in that they could ask it questions to that's trained on strategy, and then we could plug in a design thing that would give it like a brand framework. Like I'm already going right. And then over time, you know, there was this group I work with called Indigenous AI, and it was this collective that would get together groups of indigenous leaders from all over the world, and they would do meetings about the implications of AI on their society and on their practices. And out of that group, I met these kids at I think it was the University of Hawaii, who were making a programming language on top of Python that was in their indigenous tongue.
That's beautiful.
And so I wonder if there's like a version of that we could create as well, because there will be some advanced things that someone needs to know how to code. But what if instead of array, we have like a version, it's like we call it a list. Instead of a variable, which is the thing that holds the data, we call it a bucket.
You're right.
You know what I'm saying? Like if instead of an error, we call it sus. Like we come up with, and it's just rewrapping that, right? Like I remember a couple years ago, there was someone who went viral, and I think it was either Hacker News or Reddit, because they were trying to make a slang-based version of Python, but it came out, it was all white programming language on top of Python that was in their indigenous tongue.
That's beautiful.
And so I wonder if there's like a version on applications of AI on their society and strategy, and then we could plug in a design thing that would give it like a brand framework. Like I'm already going right. And then over time, you know, there was this group I work with called Indigenous AI, and it was this collective that would get together groups of indigenous leaders from all over the world, and they would do meetings about the implications of AI on their society and on their practices. And out of that group, I met these kids at I think it was the University of Hawaii, who were making a programming language on top of Python that was in their indigenous tongue.
That's beautiful.
And so I wonder if there's like a version of that we could create as well, because there will be some advanced things that someone needs to know how to code. But what if instead of array, we have like a version, it's like we call it a list. Instead of a variable, which is the thing that holds the data, we call it a bucket.
You're right.
You know what I'm saying? Like if instead of an error, we call it sus. Like we come up with, and it's just rewrapping that, right? Like I remember a couple years ago, there was someone who went viral, and I think it was either Hacker News or Reddit, because they were trying to make a slang-based version of Python, but it came out, it was all white dudes who were doing it, and they were doing it as a joke. So what happens if we actually build like our own programming language for real?
Right.
And teach from that.
Right.
Like these are things that, now that I ain't in Google no more, these are things I can actually work on.
I mean, that's what we need. And that's because I think that's why a lot of people be afraid of the tech. They like, we never gonna be able to do what the people who got degrees can do with it. So why would they embrace it if they stuck being a consumer of it and never the producer?
Here's the thing though, I ain't got no degrees. I got a GED, and then I went to community college, so I got my little standard, you finish your 2 years. I dropped out of UC Berkeley twice, I never finished.
Congratulations.
The degrees are not what makes you smart. I tried to go back later when I was like a little older adult, and I sat in the classroom and said, I don't need to sit here and play this game with this professor who is like ego tripping and making jokes about how Yale isn't as good as Berkeley, and high-key flirting with a 19-year-old in the front of the seat, trying to prove that he has more knowledge and make us scared about a test that's multiple choice. Like, what is my time here for? And one thing I'll say is, you know, I just literally yesterday received an award from UC Berkeley. It's the first award ever for tech integrity for civil society, using tech to change society. And I sat on a panel. It was moderated by the former president of UC Berkeley, and it's a woman on the panel who was in a law school. It's another woman who's like something over cybersecurity. There's a computer science professor there with me, and I'm listening to these people talk about what they think is needed to make AI responsible. And I'm listening to this person say, well, you know, I do human rights impact assessments, which is where you like guess how a model might impact someone's human rights. And she said something along the lines of, you know, it's not hard. All you got to do is get a couple people in the room together and you could think about it because we're all human. And I'm like, this person has never worked on a commercial AI at production scale. You've never actually worked on an AI that has touched billions of people. So you don't know how absurd that sounds. That you think that you could get together 5 people who just happen to be human and think of the needs and the complexes of 8 billion people in this world from a checklist.
But I could imagine a corporation would love that because now, you know, it decreases their accountability whatsoever. Yeah, we hired her, came in, she did her assessment, said, hey, minimum impact on human rights. Thank you.
But even then, when your product actually hurts people in other regions, you're still accountable. So that's a checklist and an assessment is not a replacement.
$1 billion in by that time where they get smacked with a fine and they feel good.
Not just a fine, you get smacked with Gen Z and Gen Alpha not using your products no more because they remember that you had black people looking like gorillas. That you had us tagged as gorillas and they say, we don't want to use Google, we'll go search on TikTok instead. Which is what's happening. TikTok's eating search business for, you know, that's Google's bread and butter. It's search. It's killing YouTube, it's killing search, it's killing Instagram, it's killing Meta, it's killing Snapchat, because we'd rather just go to TikTok and search for what we need.
Tick, tock, tick, tock. Time is up.
So we're
just being dramatic.
I'm like, what? I'm a little too acoustic for that.
Dramatics in there.
So all that to say, sitting on that panel, I realized that I'm much more capable of designing and solving the problems in these systems than people who have multiple PhDs that lead departments at schools, because I don't sit around theorizing about it. I got my hands dirty and did it. I've been working in AI for 12 years. I've worked in production scale systems. I built things that I regret and things I'm extremely proud of. But along the way, I've actually had to sit in a room and say, well, hey, if we do this, then it might produce this result in this country. So how do we honor the social norms of that country? For example, after George Floyd died, product inclusion at Google, which is headed by Annie Jean-Baptiste, a Haitian woman, decided that they wanted it. So if you ask Google, like, okay, Google, is it okay to be gay? That Google would say yes. Okay, Google, is it okay to be transgender? Then Google would say yes. Okay, Google, is it okay if boys like boys? And Google would say yes. And I said, I get why y'all are doing that in the US, but like my mom is a fundamentalist Christian and doesn't agree with my sexuality. And aren't we pushing off our beliefs onto people who don't? I'm gay. I'm cool with it. I understand people aren't, and I respect their right to not agree with my lifestyle. So why? What does that mean that we're normalizing? And then how are we going to deal with that when we get to places like Saudi Arabia, where that is not a social norm, where it is not socially acceptable, or Russia or Nigeria, where it's gay, or where being gay is illegal, or Ghana, where being gay is illegal? How are we going to deal with the system in those places? Because are we going to force Google's view this one person in here who wants to do this for a marketing lick and to make Google look good and to get something on their bullet points so they can get promoted? Do you get to decide what's right and wrong for the rest of the world? Right? When our value systems as humans are not 100% aligned, then there will never be an algorithm that is 100% fair. We are always making trade-offs in value systems and deciding whose matters more. So why are we letting companies and the random employees that happen to be in the rooms for those conversations or happen to work on certain teams decide morality for the world? So the way it rolled out in the US, there's a blog post about it. And then when you went to other countries and you asked it, it said, sorry, I can't answer that. So they did that fairness gerrymandering.
Yeah.
Right? But even then, why do you get to be, as a publicly traded for-profit company, the arbitrator of morality in protection of your profits? I personally don't agree with that. I don't agree that a company like Google should get to decide what is and isn't the correct version of very what's the word, very challenged ideologies that may be legal in a normal sense, but are not universally aligned on morally within the same geographic region, right? So like, why are you taking a stance?
Yeah, I think that's where you get the chaos. That's where you get the wars. That's where you get all of the problems, because I think it was, who was it? It was the Pope actually that said something. I'm not sure if this was a real article or it was generated or whatever, but I believe in the stance that he was taking at the time, and I never agree with the Pope. But he was just talking about when you got a lot of these like Islamic countries and things of that nature, and I think he was using Muammar Gaddafi as an example. He says some of these countries require a dictator in order to keep stabilization and peace in that region, right? So when you go over there and you enforce it, you take over, right, a regime, and you try to put in a puppet one, or you go kill a president, or you go kill a king, right? Now look what happened afterwards. There's an increase in slave trade, there's death, there's poverty, there's disease, right? This country is completely tarnished and destroyed, but or it was generated or whatever, but that's where you get the
are not universally aligned on morally within the same geographic region, right? So like the version of protection of your profits. Why do you get to be, as a publicly traded for-profit company, the arbitrator of morality in protection of your profits? I personally don't agree with that. I don't agree that a company like Google should get to decide what is and isn't the correct version of very, what's the word, very challenged ideologies that may be legal in a normal sense, but are not universally aligned on morally within the same geographic region, right? So like, why are you taking a stance?
Yeah, I think that's where you get the chaos. That's where you get the wars. That's where you get all of the problems, because I think it was, who was it? It was the Pope actually that said something. I'm not sure if this was a real article or it was generated or whatever, but I believe in the stance that he was taking at the time, and I never agreed with the Pope. But he was just talking about when you got a lot of these like Islamic countries and things of that nature, and I think he was using Muammar Gaddafi as an example. He says some of these countries require a dictator in order to keep stabilization and peace in that region, right? So when you go over there and you enforce it, you take over, right, a regime, and you try to put in a puppet one, or you go kill a president, or you go kill a king, right? Now look what happens afterwards. There's an increase in slave trade, there's death, there's poverty, there's disease, right? This country is completely tarnished and destroyed. But you marketed this as if you was freeing these people, right? And you should not have that power to just be able to go to places and destabilize them, right? And so I believe that same thing, then he talking to, you know, essentially United States government, right? And other governments that do that. But now you're talking to these tech companies that have the ability to do that. Because that first part of destabilization is going to be through that changing of and influencing the morals and the values to challenge the state, right? But what is the ripple effect of that, right? How many people actually literally die from that? How many, you destabilize that whole entire region, now that country got to go through 100 years of famine, you know what I mean, and destruction. Because of what? So 100%, we don't think about the power that these companies wield with the decisions that they make day to day, and the ripple effects that have in destroying the stabilization, because you get to look at it from your viewpoint and say that, yeah, no, we should change this because I feel like that.
Exactly.
You don't get to change that. That's playing God, right? And then, yeah, when you have those challenges, you wonder why.
They get sick because it's not like the whole company comes and takes a vote. It's whoever happens to be in the inclusion role or in the responsibility role, which even how they got there, how was that decided? Yeah. And even then, whose voices are in the room and whose voices are left out. I mean, I represent a ton of communities. I'm Black, I'm Latina, I'm queer, I'm a veteran, I'm different. I check all the tax boxes, right? But I don't fully represent and never want to speak fully on behalf of any of those communities. Because within those communities, there's infinite diversity of opinion. You want to know how Black people feel? Talk to a variety of Black people. I can't speak on behalf of us. You want to know how Latino people feel? I'm not your representative. I'm not someone who speaks on behalf of the gay community, even though I'm a member of it, because I don't represent all of it. No one individual does. So even if you go and you ask the employee groups at Google, you ask the Black Googler Network what they think, the fact that those black people are even at Google means that they represent a small sample of the actual community.
Right.
There's a lot of black people that have a lot of views that do not have the training, education, access, or resources to even know how to apply for a job at Google, let alone be one of the couple thousand people that's there.
Yeah, there's a large array of different ethnic backgrounds.
And so these companies are getting the power to play God without the accountability or responsibility to the people that are responsible to their shareholders. And that is so much more dangerous than politicians that we picked, or even if we didn't pick them, that are in our face and we know what they're doing.
And the crazy part, a lot of it, these are atheists playing God. And they don't believe in none of the religious or spiritual systems whatsoever. So it's a spiritual warfare thing where you get to be in position and you say, I don't believe in God. And now you get to make decisions that directly trample on somebody else's rights and beliefs. You know what I mean? That's a dangerous thing when you don't even know that this person who comes from this ideology is making decisions based on their own ideology, right? Which is direct warfare against yours. And then when you feel attacked, there's nothing that you can do. And the consequence is already too late.
And the companies will say, well, we can't let more people from the outside in because it's our proprietary technology. You got to protect our intellectual property. How about you respect my spiritual property? How about you respect my actual reality that you're affecting?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
And then the people end up fighting each other, right, over decisions that the corporations have made. And you try to tell people this not is happening, like, no, this is my reality. I know this is happening because things have changed and it's creating chaos. This chaos would not be happening if things were flowing in the same manner in which they were. So individually, as you try to create stability in your life and you try to create peace in your life and find harmony, then you have to deal with the outside effect of things that's outside your control. I can't control how this AI and this app algorithm works whatsoever, right? You have your household, you're trying to raise your children a certain way, but you can't control outside influences. I just wanted to buy your technology to give to my child because they said they wanted to use it. I didn't want you to influence a spiritual position in life. Right now, you don't have a relationship with your grown child because they got an algorithm that helped them become a atheist, just for lack of another example. So it's like, yeah, these are the parts where the average person don't have time to think about because they living and just reacting to everything. They don't have time to, and this is where we go back again to at the beginning of the conversation, talking about thinking. The average person can't afford to really think. Right? Like, imagine a person becoming a philosopher. You don't have that time to philosophize about things. Besides, people get high, hit the blunt, and have a random thought. But for me, philosophy is the art of thinking. Saying you a thought leader, you're thinking the thoughts that you can help give to people because they don't have the time to think about them. Right? Saying you a future, you have the time to simulate, think about the triggers and changes that's happening in society, right? So that by the time they happen, people are not reacting slow, right? And they can interact with the opportunities that come along with it, right? Like, all of this requires time, which most people don't have at all. So most people are not thinking. We're just organisms of reaction, right? And that's how they want to keep you operating. That's the same thing with politics. People don't have time to think. I need you to tell me what to do. Yo, who should I vote for? Yo, what are they doing? I don't know. I just need to line up like a drone in line and click this box. That's what I ain't got time to be thinking about all this. People like their lives ordered, right? But you don't know who's ordering your steps. And that's the dangerous thing.
Yeah, and the people who don't care about you, don't care about your community, know they're leaving your community out of the way. They're designing these systems or even testing them for harm. Or even when they do test them for harm in your community and they find it, they don't prioritize fixing it unless you raise hell.
Yeah.
Right? And so, that model that you're talking about the thought leaders versus the doers, it brings me back to the Underground Railroad. So a lot of people don't know about the conductors, right? Who were the group of free enslaved Africans and some white sympathizers up in Canada who orchestrated the whole thing. They put the whole thing together. right? They were the ones who came up with the paths, the routeways, how it would happen, how they would get them over the border into Canada. Now, the thing is, they didn't tell nobody who they were, because they knew if someone got caught along the way and knew who they were, they'd take the whole thing down. They didn't even tell Harriet Tubman that the conductors existed until after she had already done like 20 trips. But these were the folks who were organizing the steps along the way, who told that pastor to say, when someone comes and they knock twice and they whistle, and you just open the door, let them in, and you wait till the cart comes and put them in there. There are people who have to play that role, but that role is just as valuable as the conductor, because without them, the plan doesn't exist. They're just in a different position of execution. So there are people who just need to be like, okay, tell me what to repost, tell me what to retweet, tell me what to pay attention to and watch. And then you've got your people who think a little more regionally. Hey, they're kind of hot on that pastor, let's go to this other one. But then you've got the conductors who have a responsibility to shape the whole thing and insulate themselves from being harmed in the event that people who oppose it come to it, right? And so I think that there's levels that people are on. And I identify more as towards the conductor side as someone who can see at a much larger level and is responsible for orchestrating pieces, right? And in that, there's this responsibility to make it, to go to the app and click this button here and do this and put your idea here and then it comes out.
Right.
There's a responsibility to construct that. I think those types of tools that help the folks know how to play their role in collective liberation or collective shaping of this system or redesign of this system without forcing them to have to become conductors and not judging them because they're not. That's not their role. Everyone's not supposed to know the politics of why you have to say this way or what this or that means. There has to be grace for people. Right? Like even with pronouns, like that's new to me. That wasn't something, I'm gay as hell. That was not a part of my community when I was growing up, that I had to call you Zay Zim Zer Zaddy. I gotta call you Frog. I got like, this is new for me.
Wow, it's a new programming language.
This is new for me. And so people gotta give me grace if I accidentally misgender you. But if you say, how could you do that? You're one of our community. You don't and come at me. Then how I'm supposed to ever feel welcome?
You know, we got a saying in Islam, there's no compulsion in Islam. Which means that I'm not going to try to force my beliefs and ideology on you, right? If I present myself as an example of something that, and you like, wait a minute, what's behind your discipline? What's behind the way you move? Like, tell me your strategy. And I'm like, okay, well, now you're getting into my funnel, right, to my belief system. And if that works for you, right, then you can take that upon yourself and utilize that to create the results that you believe that I get from it, right? But I'm not about to go walk around preaching, telling you, stop doing that, do this. You know what I mean? That's where we have this thing where the world is becoming so compulsory, where we're trying to force everything onto people, right? And what it does is, first of all, if you have to force something onto someone, it's not flow. They don't want it. You know what I mean? So if it's something that is naturally good for people, right, then allow them the grace to be able to evolve into it, right? This is actually what most people don't understand, why Islam grows so much, because ain't nobody trying to force it on you. You know what I mean? It's giving you a choice, take it or leave it, right? So I believe that if the world wasn't so insecure, right, about their position, they wouldn't need to force it onto other people, right? They would say, well, this is good, and people are going to obviously see this is good for them, right? And they're going to want what's good for them, right? And that's the position that I take spiritually, right? That's the position that I take mentally as a leader, as a doers. The evidence has to be based on the results, right? So it's like if I'm ultra rich and you ask me how you want to be rich, I'm just gonna give you the way I did it. I'm not about to walk around like, bro, you broke, let me tell you how to do this. Nah, forget the way you doing yours.
I don't know.
Come rock with me. Now,
I got some friends that need a dictator and be like,
okay, that happened a little different with money. It's a little different with money. You can't dictate people. Look, you broke, I can teach you how to get some money. Come over here. And then sometimes, yes, you do have that hand to where, you know, you can make suggestions to people, but it's just saying we're not gonna force it. You know what I mean? We telling you what it is, because what happens is you have a problem. And what I'm trying to tell you is this is a way to solve it, right? Like, if you don't have a problem, I can't give you a solution. You can only give people a solution that got a problem. And when people can recognize they got a problem, see, being broke is an easy problem to recognize. Yo, don't have money, I got a way to help. Boom. You ain't got to force that on me. You already gave me a reason to come tap in with you. Now, some people, you can't force them to change because it won't work. They won't accept it, right? That's the problem with forced change, is that it eventually becomes rejected. So I got brothers, I got family that I can't force them to want more for themselves, right? Because they're not made like that. But I can see them along the path of realization, right? And if I can give you all the tools for you to realize it for yourself, now you're going to grow into that understanding, right? Sometimes people need it in different ways. Like you can drop a seed on somebody, and when they up, their ego is so hot that they won't listen. But when they down, they remember that seed like, yeah, bro, what you say, man, you was right. You know what I'm saying? I ain't forced it on you, but I might say it repetitiously until it's your time to get it.
I think what we're seeing with that forced nature coming out much larger from communities that have been marginally oppressed or like historically oppressed is the idea of symbolic power. So symbolic power is the idea that you can name something and have everyone else accept it as normal, right? And we've seen changes in symbolic power over time within our own communities. Like the United Negro College Fund, like we would not be out here saying and calling each other the same things MLK called other black people, because that's no longer what we want to be called. As we got our symbolic power and agency back over naming our communities, we said we don't want to use that word. You call us African American, you call us black, right? And so we had that agency and we regained that symbolic power to do so. But what I'm seeing is there's a pendulum swing in the opposite direction, right? Where a lot of these communities that haven't had the ability to name themselves started out over here, and now that they got the power, they're doing too much. And they're trying to force everyone to reconcile instead of giving grace, right? Like I had elders growing up who would still use language that to me was antiquated, but I knew it wasn't with ill intent. And so I'm not sitting there lecturing an elder, trying to correct the elder. I might express my viewpoint to them and then let them choose whether or not they accept it, but also recognize when there's no ill intention, when it's not an intentional act of oppression. And I feel like because of that swing, what's happening is those groups of people, you know, Paulo Freire in Pedagogy of the Oppressed says that when the oppressed person becomes free, their only model for humanity is the oppressor. So sometimes they just copy paste the oppressor. So I feel like some of these groups that are going to the other extreme with the naming and with the identity and receive my reality is real or I'm gonna force it on you, right? Are just copying what's been done to them.
Right.
And are copying that.
You end up creating further harm.
Of course.
Because that force is going to have an equal force that rejects it and push back, right? And you're not gonna like the pushback. And the pushback may come in forms of insults. It may come in the form of protests. It may come in the form of more marginalization, right? More oppression, whatever it may be. Because anytime you have to force something on, it means that people haven't accepted it, right? And people do not accept things that they don't understand, right? So within that gap of getting someone to understand something, you have to educate them. And then sometimes maybe there's never understanding, and that's what you learn as tribes, right? Me as a masculine black Muslim man who has multi-dimensional aspects of self, I've never tried to force my understanding of me on anybody, because I believe I'm too rare to be understood in the first place, right? But I'm gonna be respected. That's different, right? I don't need nobody to know all of my beliefs and be like, bro, you gotta believe this too. Otherwise, there's something wrong with you. You know what I mean? You gotta have this spiritual thing. Like, no, you gotta do it this way. You gotta eat how I eat, right? What the hell wrong with you? Like, everybody got time to be trying to do all that. It'd be something wrong with me. Nah, I'm just going to, like I said, constantly represent the results of the things that I practice, right? And then people gonna naturally gravitate towards those things. But when you got power corrupts at the same time, right? And you said something that was key, is that you identifying that you are a part of it, a movement, but at the same time, you identify your separation from it, right? That you can't represent the whole. And there are some people that are in positions of power, they make decisions for the whole, right? And what this does is it makes everybody look at the brand, and now they got an issue because you happen to be in this high level position of power, right? To dictate your values onto the world, right? And that's when somebody else say, well, I'm in this position of power, I'm about to dictate the opposite. And then you get this war in between, and one person is villainized, the other person is saying, well, hey, I was just the oppressed. And it's like, wait a minute, y'all both in positions of power doing the same thing.
Arguing over ideologies instead of reshaping new ways to coexist.
Right.
I feel like that's the
Build
problem.
cooperation.
The idea that the world will be unified one way or another is false and doesn't match the spiritual reality.
It don't even need to be, colors don't have to overlap each other. The whole thing about the rainbow is each color is able to have their own space, right? Once they are overlapped in each other, that's when you get darkness. You feel me? So it's like, I believe in separation in the sense that I have ownership over my space, you have ownership over your space. The problem happens is when you want to dominate my space.
Absolutely.
You feel me? Now it's like, all right, I gotta get you out of my space. You tripping? You wildin'. Like I just said this is me over here, and you saying, nah, I want to sit here. You hop on my lap, back up. You feel me? But that's what's happening. Everything is overlapping right now, and people need their space in order to feel liberated. And you can't have peace without liberation.
And I feel like the reason those spaces are overlapping is also very intentional, because then it stops us in the one moment in history that we have the collective voice to force these systems to get onto their knees and listen to us, not us being on the knees outside protesting, begging them for entrance. We have the collective power right now and the technology to completely redesign the way this stuff works. We're arguing over pronouns.
Well, because we don't have a collective identity. See, when you can identify a large group of people, you can put them under one movement, right? But the world is about individualism right now. Those are things that are classic that happens during different shifts and different times. You have technological innovation, you have overemphasis on, identity of the individual rather than the collective, right? All of these things start to coincide and happen during the same periods of time. So, but what does this do? It leaves the people at disharmony at the very moment in time that they need to have a collective identity. There was the 1% thing that happened during Bush office, right? To where these people of all different backgrounds decided they wanted to occupy Wall Street. They put themselves under a collective identity to say, hey, this is us and that is them.
We don't call it the array of humans.
The array. It's the league of the array. But it's real because you got to identify a villain, and the people have made each other identities the villain, right? And we found extremism in the identities of self. But at the same time, it's crazy that so many people are so extreme in their identity and lost in it at the same time. You know what I mean? Because it's this ego where you're overthinking self and you don't have an extensive collection or connection with the collective, right? There's no harmony whatsoever.
Because the thing that's happened strategically since the 60s in this country in particularly is the destruction of community entities, to where community becomes based around identity and not around common goals, which I think was different. Even when you look back at the Black Panther Party, yes, what they organized was for Black people, but they messed with the Brown Kings. They messed with the LGBTQ movement. They all supported each other. They didn't all agree fully on values, but we all have common goals. There are certain things we want to stop happening. You're willing to support us. We're willing to support you. And they move forward collectively as different colors of that rainbow, if you will. And now it's just around my morals and my values, which are always going to be different than other people's. They're even going to be different than other versions of yourself. What I thought was right and wrong when I was 16 is very different than what I think is right and wrong now. What I thought was right and wrong when I was 25 is also very different than what I think is right and wrong now. So who I am cannot be based in quicksand, something that's always sinking and changing. And then to fight someone else over that and want them to change in a way that I think is appropriate is to act on behalf of the oppressor in personal spaces.
This happens during time where the less power you have, the more you feel empowered by your identity, right? So this is why people are clinging on to it, because they don't have nothing else. We have less rights in history, right? So people are saying, well, this is who I am, because that's all you can walk outside and own. So this is why people start looking for these groups of extreme identity to have this sense of belonging, this sense of something that you can't control, right? Because everything else is outside of your control. right? There's a thing where it's called cosmic anxiety, when you feel like you have no control over cosmic events that affect you, right? So it's kind of like thinking about a solar activity that's going to hit Earth and there's nothing you can do about it, right? There's so many things that you can control in that time period, right? You can control your name, you can control who you are, so you start holding on to these things. I can't do nothing else about anything else. We can't control the government, so you start looking for these mechanisms of where do I get a sense of control and power, right? And right now, the last thing is you sink to the identity. And this has happened over time and time. This is why human beings are very predictable, right? And when we think we're special, you actually are just rightly falling in line with a cycle of predictability that happens to coincide with these events during the shifts of human history. And if we can jump out of that predictability by being educated on it, then perhaps we can jump out that ego and actually focus on real things of control, which only can happen if you have the collective, because there are so many things that are stronger than the individual that they can't not go against, but they're not stronger than the collective. So yes, enjoy your individual, have your avatars, have all of this. We love y'all when y'all fighting against each other because y'all ain't focused on us. And it's so obviously like we messing y'all up.
Yeah, they're doing it on purpose.
Yeah, but no, don't look over here though.
And that's not to say that people's identities and the things that they have experienced are not real and are not valuable or are less valuable. It's not a superlative kind of ranking of like pronouns matter more or less than this, like all are true at once. But when we're hyper focused on just one piece that is even in and of itself the result of a larger battle, then we end up being pawns in a game that actually serves to continue to oppress us, as opposed to being people who are designing the rules, or even the actual player saying, I'm getting off the board.
Yeah, and you could be, it's just funny. It's like, perhaps that's the fight that they want you in, because the other fight, you're not even paying attention to. You know what I mean? Like you fighting so hard for this one over here. Man, we about to change this part of the system, and the whole time they laughing like, bro, we ain't even worried about that. They don't even see what we doing over here. Like we really controlling the whole world. And what all we doing is we keep throwing inroads and we keep slowing down that fight, so they have to put more energy into it. So when they do get their wins, they feel gratification from it, right? So they feel like they've done something, and that's enough to satisfy the human spirit. So it's like controlled opposition, right? In military campaigns around the world, they ain't go buy the revolution, but then they tell them at some point in time, we need y'all to pop back up and oppose us a little bit, just so that it can constantly create this balancement, because you have this fever of what happens to where it swells up enough energy and it got to be released. But as long as the people feel like there's this opposition, then they feel like there's some normalcy going on, right? They feel like, okay, maybe things can change. But most of the time it's controlled opposition. It's bought and it's paid for. And people don't know when they're part of revolutions or controlled opposition, because they don't tell the people, they control the leader.
100%. They don't want them moving in ways that would actually cause real change.
Hell no. It's much cheaper to buy the revolution than to fight it. But listen, I've been having an amazing time sitting down next to you. You have a very brilliant mind. I see why you won the Integrity Award in technology, because you care, right? It's rare for somebody of your background that actually has the capability to build, not just to think about it, but you travel around the world speaking, teaching, educating, caring about where we go in this next phase, right, of our relationship with technology. And I think that matters, and we need more people that aren't afraid to utilize their voice and their experience, their expertise, and their levels of mastery, right, to teach the rest of the world, right? And in many ways, you're able to act selflessly, because you're able to say, okay, this is who am I, but let me sidestep who am I and let me have a broader conversation, right? I think that that's very important to do as a leader, right? Because then you're empathizing with people who aren't like you, right? And you're empathizing with all these different perspectives and views. So now people who may have disagreed with you can now find commonality, And I sit down, I sit across from people. I don't argue with people because I'm only looking for what we agree on. If you want to find somebody to argue with, it's 7, 8+ billion people on the planet. I'm sure somebody gonna have that with you. I don't want to because my time is too valuable for me to be talking to brick walls. You know what I mean? And that's what happened when you run into those arguments a lot of time. And then you lose, it's a lose-lose. Whether you win, you lose. When you lose, you lose. So what are we doing it for? I'd rather build. Right? We have a conversation and we can talk about building a new SAS and building a new thing for the next generation. That's a much better bridge of commonality to saying that, all right, what we disagree at. Let's talk about this real quick.
But the disagreement
Now,
get the clicks.
Yeah, the disagreement go get the clicks, but you know, I'm part of that generation that wants to create meaningful content, right? And every year there are millions of people who go to concerts. There are millions of people who are in love with entertainment, crazy, hoorah. Millions of people who go to the strip club, but at the same time, there are millions of people who go to the museum. Museum don't do nothing new and different, but they got value there, right? And that's what we've created. We've created a museum that every time you come, no matter when you come, there will be meaningful value here. That's what high level conversation is. So I want to thank you for being a part of our museum that curates the highest level conversations throughout time that human beings need in order to move forward. This has been a high level conversation. Make sure y'all follow her at Tech with X. Peace. Till next time.
Oh man, that was a good combo, man.
That was brilliant. I think
High level conversation. Tap in with the guy.
That was fire, Chad.
Yeah, so I'll say it like this. So right now with technology and artificial intelligence, we're at a moment in the world that's already happened, right? If you go back to when most of the people in the USA were farmers, and they used to use horses or cows or oxen or whatever to like drag carts and drag tools across the land, and that's how things were done. And then one day somebody creates the tractor. And maybe at first only a few people get access to the tractor, right? The real rich farms, the people who can actually go and afford that and make it happen. And then all the other farmers are saying, well, that's a cool tool for them, but it's not gonna make me not need my horses. Well, it's not gonna come from my farm because we're too far out. They can't ship that big old tractor over here. Or I'm gonna always use my oxen to do my land because it's better for the land. Resisting artificial intelligence shaping any industry is the equivalent of saying the tractor is not going to affect my work. We've seen this type of transformation of the fundamental way that things get done in other industries as well. We've seen it in photography. All photography used to be film, where you used to have to take the film out, you had to go develop it in a dark room, and now most of photography and most of videography we do are on digital cameras. When it first came out, the digital cameras, all the old school photographers were like, oh, that's not real photography. That's not ever gonna replace me. I still have a place. I'm more valuable. Or even like photo editing programs. People were like, well, that's not the same as doing it in a dark room and clipping it and cutting it yourself. We always resist change. And the question now is, instead of us, one, putting our heads in the sands and pretending like it's not gonna happen, or two, believing that somehow we are immune from it or that we can avoid it, I challenge everyone to ask, what can we do to shape it so that it works in a way that works well for us? So that we're not reacting to changes or uses of these AI technologies that other people choose for us, but that we actually get to be active participants and deciders of how this technology plays out. So one, the robots aren't coming, they're already here. The question is, how do you want them to play out in your future and for the people who come after you?
Well, I think that goes into just the simplification of, having an understanding of what you want to do, right? I look at technology as a way to be able to enhance yourself if needed be, right? My formula goes back to artificial intelligence plus human intelligence equals enhanced intelligence. right? So for me, the product is intelligence. How will you use intelligence in some capacity to enhance, right, your values, the solutions that you have? How will you use it in a way to solve problems, to be able to possibly cut down time and use it as a resource for it, to enhance your creativity? So if you don't have that naturally to where you want to be a problem solver, then AI ain't going to be nothing for you, because you're going to use it in whatever direction that you want to enhance your intelligence for. But if you are a community activist and a leader and you want to utilize it in some sort of way to enhance the policies or methods that you utilize in your community, then yes, it can help, right? You just think about, what is it like to have intelligent people work for you? What would it be if you had more resources and more access, right? What would it be if just for some people having access to research, right? Research departments are huge things, right? In companies that people get paid millions for. Sometimes projects never come out. They just R&D forever, right? Just that little element of research that informs our decisions better, right, is key. Because sometimes we have the passion, but that don't mean you have the intelligence to actually solve the problem. So for me, I'm looking at it as that intelligence is the commodity that you can utilize to enhance whatever thing that you want to impact, rather. So for me, as a thought leader, as a futurist, as a change maker, I'm always trying to figure out, how do we come up with more effective and efficient solutions, right, to create progress.